Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Crackdown. We got the episode wrong last time in the final production, but we're getting it right this time. So hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Crackdown. Please edit episode 18. And today we have amazing from Misfits, head coach of Misfits right now, strategic coach.
Assistant, I think, in me.
Oh, okay.
He promoted me. It's a good.
Okay. Whatever. You're the main coach of the fucking team, and you're the one on stage, right? You're the one that's doing the pick man. So
no, I mean, Hanno's doing the pick band, so I don't want to be lying here. But we call it strategic coach.
Okay. We'll call it the strategic coach, the real coach, as we call it here in esports, the one that actually handles the stuff in game. So we have amazing here, obviously former pro player, former LEC analyst for a little bit there, played in NA, EU, won a championship in NA, semifinals of Worlds, has a long history in this game. He even played back when I played. We've faced against each other in NALCS multiple times. Yeah, old times. And then we also have Thorn here to discuss everything. So we got a bunch of topics today to jump into. Obviously, we'll talk about your transitions, how your career really went. And then there's a couple interesting things that have happened recently. Mainly, we'll jump into the discussion of like early aggression junglers versus late game junglers and really like if there is any downsides to playing this early game style. I think there's differing opinions on that. And then also the new pickup tier team, which is now kha'zix replacing B-Boy for Misfits. So yeah, I mean, we can jump into it straight from the start. I mean, it's crazy because when I think about your career, it's like you have the natural progression, the one that like all of us junglers go through, where you come on the scene, right? You're this Lee Sin god, you're the mechanical wonder kid, and then by the time that you end your career, you're the Sejuani, you're the intellectual like brain player. So yeah. I mean, I guess where I'm gonna go with this is like, do you think that having that type of progression has helped you like coach Razork, for example? I mean, obviously we talked to Fabiven on the show, and he thought that you had a lot of impact on his jungle pathing and things like that, and you're able to like help improve his brain. Like, do you think that gives you like an advantage as a coach, just having the two sides of jungling?
Yeah, I mean it does, and especially the progression helped me a lot because like when you progress from being mechanically gifted then to not being mechanically gifted, you basically have to focus on basically the intrinsics of the game and honestly like certain things that you can replicate without even utilizing mechanics. So it becomes a lot more about theory of the game and like how to basically position and path than becomes of actually like mechanical interaction, which means that like if someone with actual mechanics utilizes those things, it becomes like really, really good for them because then he has both the brawl and the brain, So I think it definitely helped. And starting out as mechanical also helped me like basically understand someone's viewpoint, especially Razork's viewpoint in certain matches where it's like, oh, I can outplay this,
I'm just going to fight.
I'm just going to fight. I'm just going to do stuff. And it gave me a lot of perspective and makes me helps me to understand basically like every viewpoint that a jungler can have right now.
So the thing that's weird about that, though, is like if people don't know, I remember talking to Veteran when this move was rumored to happen, when like in the off season, where basically if people don't know, like Misfits was the team where pretty early on people knew like all the rumored players who did end up joining the team. And so when you consider Razork was joining, right, and he also joined with the support he used to have in his National League team, the Vodafone Giants team. Well, in that team, right, his mid laner was the guy called Milika, who was supposed to join Vitality, which if people don't know, Vitality weren't supposed to be as bad as they were. They just never ever got their starting mid laner, unfortunately, because of like some visa issue. So when he played with that Milika guy, basically he was just considered someone who was like just a dog of that player. Like he just used to camp for the guy 24/7. So you think, right, if you've played with the same support, you're probably going to play similarly. You come into LEC, probably played similarly. He didn't play at all similarly as far as I can tell in LEC. So was there something about his old team or something like that? There's a reason he was playing that. Why was he so different in LEC?
I mean, it could have multiple reasons. Like, first of all, when you come to LEC, like you kind of have to get used to honestly, the tempo just upgrades. So it's kind of like the transition from like college play to the NBA. I think in most cases where suddenly you have to make a lot more decisions within a short time period, whereas before you could just like honestly prepare for it in multiple cases because you could anticipate what the enemy is doing because they're really obvious about it. And when you come to LEC, like that whole tempo upgrades and you actually have to become a bit like more fast paced in terms of thinking. And then like the whole team, like especially Fabi was a really aggressive player, B-Boy who had like his aggressive moments. I think overall the team itself just made it so that he became more aggressive, more active, I think, on the map.
What is that angle? Because I want to ask both of you about this, right? Why is it that everyone who is a jungler, it is really the progression? Like, basically, there's only one way you can survive as a jungler in your career. You have to figure out the smarts, so at the end, you can be the brain jungler. Like, there's almost nobody, like, 7 years in. Actually, yeah, that's why I give Jankos mad props. His mechanic's still fucking straight fire half the time. Like, he's one of the only players I've ever seen who just actually kept his main strength. Everyone started, like, if people don't know, Smithy started as a fucking mechanics god. Like, these guys, I know that sounds mad, because now he looks like the ultimate epitome, you know. Yeah. So the crazy thing is, like, why eventually is it just like a conscious decision you think the jungler makes? Like, if these people really practice super hard only at those shots, they'd surely still have good mechanics. Like, I know from Counter-Strike, it's not that your literal reflexes have gone. You could definitely do that still.
I mean, I guess personally what I would say is that it feels like a more consistent way to win when you're just able to, like, outpath the opponent, and that ends up being, like, something that you gravitate towards, because when you play against other mechanical players, if you're just fighting 1v1 all the time, or you're just taking fights that don't really have, like, good logic built into, like, the reasoning behind the fight, you can just, like, end up getting, like, smashed in the game. And if you have the other option, it just seems like the better way of winning. And then also, like, I mean, I guess one person that I also thought of was Svenskeren, because I feel like Svenskeren still is, like,
pretty good. Yeah,
sure. He's pretty mechanically sound later on in his career. I just think that in general, it just doesn't feel like as stable of a way to play the game. And especially, like, if you're one of the older junglers, like, as you progress, I feel like normally you're going to have to take more of, like, a shot calling role in your team, especially in the early game, where you're controlling, like, the pace of the game, and you're, like, looking a lot more at lanes. And when you're doing all that, it's also it's hard to, like, be insane mechanically as well. So I mean, I guess that's my take on it. Amazing. What do you think?
Makes sense.
No, I'm in a similar boat. I think for me, it was like a slightly conscious decision when I was in Origin. Like, I still obviously had mechanics and everything like that, and I was still actively playing for that. But like when I noticed that, especially towards season 5 words, and then partially towards season 6, that like it was just better for me to just be a supportive kind of like not a role player, kind of like a role player to the team. So basically, the laners like would succeed. It basically made me like think more about the brains of the game instead of like trying to be the best mechanical player. So I think it is both like the natural progression of like having to take on more shot calling role, but in certain scenarios, it may be a conscious decision. I think, for example, for Jankos, I think what benefited him, I think, throughout his career is that he, until like basically maybe recently, he actually had the advantage of always being better than his teammates, if that makes sense. So like he was thought of like better as his teammates. So he was not the one that had to take the step back. You know, for me, for example, when I joined Xpecca and everything like that, I had to do like take a step back because I wasn't considered better than them. I wasn't considered a bigger name. And I think in Junko's case too, like if I think about it, his success in his career came really late. So I think like that also helps like someone's drive or like mechanical ability to stay up there, because you're just practicing to be the best player that he can potentially possibly be yourself, and then you're also thought of as the carrier of the team. So both of these things are basically like playing into it, I think, for him.
Because I actually think that whole angle, the problem is you're going to have an amazing highlight reel if you go for all crazy mechanical players and if you play these champions. So it means your name will get huge. But if I look at the history of junglers, being super sick mechanically, it's not really even that great an angle to have. Like, it is way better to be the guy who controls the game, has great comms, can shot call, etc. Like, if you think typically, the problem is there's lots of people where if they get into the league off just mechanics, like, well, the second they have a bad year, bad season, the game changes, they're just done. Their whole career's over with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's many junglers. I mean, even Bengi, for example, in season 3, he was this mechanical god. But I mean, when you really look at junglers, like how many junglers have stayed on top for that long mechanically? It's like Clid was popping off last year, right? Like he was probably considered one of the best mechanical junglers in the world, Tien, etc. But then you have like new people come up, like you have Kanavi now. I mean, Cuz obviously has been around, but he's getting more hype now because he's winning with SKT. And I feel like those players, they just don't get the recognition anymore. So I don't even know if that's a good angle for a jungler. I feel like if you're going to be a super good mechanical player, like you might as well just play AD carry for your entire career. Like then that is the fucking role for you. But
like, I don't know if anyone saw this, but there was a clip where on his stream before he just randomly woke up one day and decided to join TSM. Who knows why these things happen, right? Yeah. Doublelift on his stream gave it like a reason, which is Doublelift's version of one of the reasons that they were able to beat IG at MSI. And he basically said they just realized that, like, why bother going for like crazy jungle picks when you can just pick someone like Skarner, which obviously you just click on the guy and then you just fucking drag him out. Like, it's not, the fact that it's a simple champion to use actually means it is OP as fuck if you can use it in that way in the jungle. Like, I feel like generally that applies to jungle. Like, I'd much rather have someone who learns how to just be good on Sejuani than like the Lee Sin God, where it's like, if this guy's like 10% off in this game, what do we even rely on? Like, what do we even know that he's going to do? I'd rather have the guy who's just super consistent and plays the boring shit.
Yeah, I mean, it was even a struggle like to begin my career with, if I remember correctly. Because like for me, it's also like I had to be really, really good mechanically to make certain champions work, and then I ran into people that like suddenly played Nunu into me, and I'm like, okay, I have to basically 60-40 him, 70-30 him in order to win this matchup. Whereas if he just plays a
Are you flaming me on my own show, or like what's happening here? Like,
I picked it up too in the end, you know, like so I picked it up. You know, I realized that just putting 2 wards in the enemy jungle and tracking the enemy jungle and then outscaling him, like in certain scenarios, could work, you know. So it's like it's easier to play that way. And for my career, it's actually been a natural progression too, where at some point I was like, okay, enemy likes to play Grace, enemy likes to play Lee Sin. Okay, what are picks that I can play into it? Okay, these tanks work, and then I would just beat him by simply like playing the game and just matching him early game and then outscaling him. So in certain scenarios, it can definitely work.
Yeah. Also, Nunu was just hidden broken at that time. Like,
it was so broken. It was so broken.
It was so ridiculously broken, and no one really picked up on it. I remember like there was like
you've nailed it, Dom. The reason why is because no one wants to be known as a person who plays Nunu loads. So it's got like a hidden like a safety trap.
I don't give a fuck as long as I'm winning the game. Like who cares? But I mean,
win's a win, right? Yeah.
Yeah, a win's a win. But also just like the way the champion functioned he was like unduelable back in the day. Like the snowball was so powerful with the attack speed slow, you actually could not fight the champion. So I remember it got to the point where we would literally just go into scrims versus teams, and we would tell them when we were going to take Baron, when we were going to take Dragon, just to see if like teams could respond to it. Like, is it possible to stop a 15-minute Baron with Nunu's Q-Max consume? And it just wasn't. And people just weren't able to counter it. So it was like, okay, fuck it. This is going to be our ticket. This is how Curse is going to go to Worlds. Get 1 game of Nunu, and then they just fucking ban it the rest of the series. We fucking lose game 5 to LMQ, you know? I mean, some things don't always pan out, but I mean, we were definitely on point with the pick, for sure.
Put it this way, that's the jungle equivalent of like Sivir for AD carries, because there was many seasons, maybe like 3 or 4 seasons, where that was always a super viable pick that actually always did well if you looked at the stats of when it was winning. But the reason nobody wants to pick it is, who the fuck as an AD carry wants an ult that just helps your team? And then secondly, it just looks whack. Like, it actually, you can do mad damage on that champion, but it just looks whack. And so since it had like the stigma of like, it's just for like shit players that just... people just wouldn't play it. You just couldn't convince them, or they would just play it like as an off pick, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's just
in the game, boys.
One thing I just realized there is how much of a fucking boomer I am, because like 15-minute Baron, like that was just a thing. That was when Baron used to spawn, and I just saw my whole chat like, Dom Keck W, man, like 15 minutes, Dom, it spawns at 20, you dumb fuck. It's like, damn, man, we played in a different fucking time back then.
Just wait till they find out what Rise used to be like, Dom.
Holy shit. Which time? Like, I don't even know what Rise used to be like. I'll be honest. Like, this champion has been reworked so many times. I have no clue. But
this Spellvamp Rise, like fake a Spellvamp Rise, is like my hat. Oh god, you can just get like CC'd for 8 seconds in a row.
It was pathetic. Yeah.
You couldn't escape his W, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm dead, you know? So it's what it is.
Well, I think that was actually the season that you played at Worlds, right? Wasn't season 5 the peak of that broken Rise where it was just W chain?
Yep. Yeah. I remember like playing in Suni even on stage, and I was like, okay, I guess he sees me. I guess I'm dead. You know, it's like there was no
counterplay, literally,
anything. And like Riot didn't even address it until a certain point, and then it came back at Worlds 2, and I was like, okay, how is this even possible? So Rice needed some reworks. I think he needs more reworks every single season just to keep it fresh, you know, for all of the new players. Maybe bring some Sylvan back in the end.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess to kind of bring it back to Razork here, how do you think he was able to improve so fast? Because obviously, like, no one had hype for him coming in. And when people look at Misfits this year, most people had them predicted 10th place, mainly because a lot of the players were unknown. Obviously, Misfits had a bad performance last year. There was no one on your roster that was like receiving any hype at all. And obviously, the roster
rookies weren't that hype, mate, because they weren't like the top players in the ERL or whatever. They were just like some decent players on a sort of good team.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my question would mainly be like, what do you think made the team click, or like, how do you think Razork improved so much? Because I mean, obviously by the end he's getting a rookie of the split.
So what I think really helped the team click, at least like in the beginning, because I think later on in the season we actually struggled a lot, because I think we went like 4-8 in the last, I think 5 weeks, including playoffs. But like in the beginning of the season, it was simply that we were so comfortable just playing like what's supposed to be off meta at that point. So basically picks that were specifically used in certain scenarios. So something like the Echo, something like that was basically just comfort, and we're able to utilize it in certain situations. So we were comfortable being uncomfortable, which really helped us. And I think that's something that Razork, like it's himself as a player is actually surprisingly exceeding at. It's basically just like if you tell him, hey, I need you to pick that pick, for example, or like he comes up with a pick like something like Echo, something like Lisa in certain scenarios, he knows how to make it work. And I think a lot of other teams are actually like staying like almost scared to screw up. And I think that whole thing didn't exist for us. So all of our players were actually of the mindset that if we screw up, if there's something that went wrong, it is what it is. And I think when I think about the rest of the teams, or a lot of the teams in the league, I think they're so scared of screwing up. And I think that's something we never had to face.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that you guys like struggled mainly because of like inability to play through other places besides for mid? Because when I think of Misfits, like when you guys were picking up all your wins, it was mainly just playing through Forbidden. And towards like the later part of the split, it seemed like people were able to read that and react to it more properly, which really made your team struggle. Is that like why you guys decided to go for a roster change? Was there something that prevented you guys from playing through the sidelines, or was it just like your players just weren't as good at the time?
So, I mean, it was kind of an active choice. I think Fabi and Razork were the ones that gelled the best out of everyone because they just do it a lot. They actually like had good synergy. So I think that was like the active pursuit of that playstyle. But I also think that like in terms of how we are jungle and bottom interaction and top interaction, I don't consider Danon, and he doesn't consider himself like like he doesn't need to be strong side. He oftentimes doesn't want to be. So for him, it's like just put me on picks like GP, which is common knowledge, like pick me on picks like that, and just try to carry the game from the other side. And I think he was really willing in that. So the top synergy was created, but it was not like actively acted upon, if that makes sense. So we didn't play through him because of it. And for bot lane, I think the whole issue we had, I think generally speaking, is that like it felt a lot of the times that there was some dyssynergy, like the players got along, but like verbally, like they were good friends to a certain extent. But in game, it kind of showed where some of the issues actually came up. Like our laning phases in bottom lane were like shaky, I'd say. So that in itself, like, I mean, it didn't play into the roster decision, but it played into us like not playing around bottom. So yeah, I do agree. Like if we actually had more play sides, like more things to work on, or like basically more things to play through, I think we would have not been caught off guard by other teams just figuring us out.
Am I getting this wrong? But Dandan was originally like a Jax player, correct? Like he played a decent amount of Jax. Okay, so as somebody who plays a lot of Jax, it seems kind of strange that he would want to be playing weak side now.
No, I mean, I think it's maybe his progression as a player. I think last year when he was like new as a rookie, he was fresh onto the scene. The whole team actually had nothing more of nothing to lose, so maybe that played into it. But also, like he's still willing to play Jackson certain matchups, and that will definitely like potentially be happening. But it's more about that the shot calling in the old team was completely different to how it is in this team. So you had like someone like Hiva and Kirei who are really, really active. So they could kind of take like certain responsibilities that Danon had to kind of like put up with like, this bit where he was the one like balancing the game a bit more. Whereas like that was Hiva and Kirei on the last roster as far as I remember. So I think him taking a step back in order to be that weak side player actually was basically to the benefit of the team, not to the benefit of himself.
I mean, well, I guess one player that we should ask about here that, there's been a lot of mixed opinions on was B-Boy, obviously. He's been removed from the team now. So I feel like you could probably answer more honestly. I mean, we talked to Forbidden, and Forbidden just told me this guy is like the mechanical prodigy of the world. He was hyping him a ton on our show, and, mostly the community was pretty low on him. A lot of people were flaming him. And I think just in general, European fans don't really like imports in your region.
Especially Koreans, if you notice.
Yeah, I mean, it's just generally
been... Everyone flame them. They flame them like harder than they would a player that played the same with the European flag, for sure.
I don't even know how many imports are left. I mean, Trick, I think, is still on SK, but both of the Koreans from XL are gone, and now the Korean players. So I think that those were the only 4 imports.
That might be it.
Yeah, in the league, besides for Destiny, I guess Korean imports. So what was your opinion on B-Boy actually... like as a player? Because to me, he looked really shaky in team fights. He had that one quality that I hate of an AD carry where it's like he can just get caught first in a team fight and just lose you the game. It gives me like Keith flashbacks from Echo Fox days. Like how strong did you think he was as a player?
So I think I think we have to differentiate between two things. So first of all, like his laning phase and like laning phase with Denik together, like last bit was kind of shaky. So that kind of played into them losing a lot of early games, them not understanding the win conditions properly. So I think that in itself like was an issue for us, and it definitely showed in a lot of the games, which is why he looked shaky, because he didn't have an equal start every game. But I think the times when he actually had like a decent start, like he was maybe like 3 to 5 CS behind, or even was winning in certain scenarios, I think then he popped off later, where his mechanics actually showed. So I think he's like a really good mechanical player, because I saw it in scrims, the outplays that he did partially. I do think that his laning phase and the fact that he's Korean also like hurt the communication patterns too, you know? So I think...
How fluent actually is he in English?
So in the beginning of the split, he was kind of, he was able to speak like basic English, like so, like certain calls in game that you also make in Korean, like MIA, whatever it is, like these kind of things. Like you even Koreans, I guess, like have it. So that definitely worked. And throughout the split, he actually improved on it. And then the another split, he was actually able to communicate properly with us, like even in day-to-day like conversations. So it definitely improved over the split. But it was kind of an issue in the beginning, because we couldn't quite know what he wanted, because like you can have a translator to basically translate like all the communication patterns like outside of the game, right? And be like, hey, before this, what do you have to say to mean that? Or in reviews, he says this, and then like we translate it. But in game, how do you have a translator? So that definitely hurt us in the beginning. But no, his main weakness was simply like not being on the same page as the rest of the team in some ways. And I think him being an import may have played into that. I think that's basically what it is. So I think his mid to late game was like top tier. I'm not sure where I would rank him like amongst the AD carries, but I could rely on him to carry games, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think this is actually pretty interesting, because you've seen from like Europe that there's like different mentalities about like, you know, it's like, oh, if one guy is different in terms of like their amount of ability to communicate, it's really impactful. Whereas like European teams normally just stray away from imports. But you look at other teams, like for example Chinese teams, where not all the imports are actually fluent in Chinese. I know like some of them, like Rookie, Doonby, etc.
The Shy still doesn't speak Chinese supposedly, and Rookie is supposed to like translate for him, which by the way nobody could do. So that means they're just not communicating with the Shy. The Shy just do whatever the fuck he wants, even though he's one world. So.
Exactly. So I guess like the mentality in China is like, oh,
Sure.
the League of Legends is a language of itself where they can communicate everything they need to through ping. So what do you think is it about like Europeans' playstyle that requires like a heightened level of communication, or like why like they can't just communicate through pings and things like that from working with Bvoy this split?
That's a really good question, actually. I think it may actually have less to do with the game itself, because like I think Europeans in general are used to more flat hierarchies, if that makes sense. So like the whole, like everyone is kind of an even ground, like everyone is communicating the same way. So everyone has their own shared responsibilities. Whereas I think like in China, it's slightly more established, where this is a game plan, like this is what we do as a team, and then like it's being executed upon. But honestly, I may be talking out my ass too, you know? I'm just speculating.
No, I believe there's some truth to that. Like from what I've heard, basically in China, the superstars kind of get their way, and even the coach sometimes has to be subservient to them. So I would guess in this case of the Shy, where he's not even talking necessarily, I would imagine the Shy talks maybe either with the coach directly, or because he used to have a Korean coach, or he uses a translator now. The coach has a discussion with him where he's like, right, Mr. The Shy, what would you like this game? And then he just tells the other ones, like, yeah, if I can do that shit, like, and then they just make it work.
Kind of pick, please. Kind of pick, or
something like that, yeah, basically.
Like, give me Callista and come fucking top lane. That's
to be fair, listen, that obviously wouldn't work for every team in the world, but it sort of will work if you just also have, like, by far the best top lane and the best mid. You know, if you brute force it, I guess you can make it work.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's definitely like a point that is fairly interesting. So I guess to jump back to your team, is that where you think like Kabi's really gonna fit in to your team? Because and another question I had on him was how did you evaluate his skill? Because obviously in Europe, everyone, you know, remembers him as this great AD carry, like somebody who's top 4. And even when you talk to European players, they're like, how good do you think he's going to be when he comes back? We talked to Alfari a couple weeks ago. He's like, yeah, no, for sure, this guy is going to be a beast. Like, how much weight did you put on his performance in NA? Like, obviously, TSM underperformed. People cited him as a huge part of that. Like, did that factor into your decision of getting Ka'Zix? Were you any more hesitant towards him because of that? Or, like, what is your perception of his skill level currently?
I mean, it's always hard to say. Like, I think we didn't really evaluate him by his TSM days, honestly, because it's really hard to just put everything into perspective. Like when you have like, first of all, that TSM roster like itself like may have had some like internal issues, whatever it's like, we don't know, like.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do know no one wants Stardock, so we can infer what we want from that.
So there were probably jungle related issues or like jungle laner synergy issues. So that definitely played into it. And I think the vacuum of NA is just a dangerous vacuum to judge people in. And I think, for example, for an AD carry, and we've seen this with Sven too, right?
Yep.
I think it's like it's kind of maybe what I was talking about, like with the Chinese versus like European approach. I think the hierarchy system in NA surprisingly is suppressing a lot of talent, and that's it's not a meme. It's actually like something that's happening. So I think someone like Reaper stands out as a coach, not because he's the greatest or like whatever it is. Like maybe now, potentially now, like maybe that changed. But overall, the NA hierarchies are really from the top down. So that means that the coaches have a lot more say than you may think they do, and you have to listen to them to a certain extent. So that whole like everyone is on equal grounds is something that is that you know from EU, and then when you come to NA, suddenly that's not happening anymore. Your agency is kind of gone, and if you don't have agency as a player, which I think Kobe like needs to have, like or any player needs to have that comes to NA from the EU, like if that's gone, like who are you as a player? You're basically just a follower, and I think. At least like in TSM's approach, and that's, I mean, from the outside perspective too, just like that they wanted Kobe to be someone that he couldn't be, and I think the same happened for Sven, like a vocal AD carry that's going to shot call every single game, like whatever it is, similar to double lift, but he can't make someone a double lift if he's not a double lift, and it doesn't need to be, like let someone be who they are, and we judge Kobe by the fact that he was an outstanding AD carry for years in EU, like he was considered top 3, top 4 consistently, so and. To be completely fair, like we needed some more balance in the team. And I think there's no knock on Beaver because honestly, he may have been victim of circumstance because he is a Korean import and maybe we didn't prepare enough for him. So maybe we can take some of the blame as coaches, as like whatever it is, But it's like Kobe kind of alleviates some of the issues we had in terms of like more stable laning phase, hopefully more stable like overall gameplay, and just allowing us to have more just more replicable games. I think that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess the point where I would content you there would be that I always thought that Kabi was supposed to be a follower on the team. Like that was when I looked at the TSM lineup, I viewed it as they have vocal mid laner, vocal jungler, vocal top laner, and their bot lane is just supposed to exist. And that's normally what Kabi's been good at. He's just been good at like existing bot lane, not losing lane super hard, and then being super consistent in team fights. I mean, I guess the part that was like unnerving to me as someone who watched all the games was his inability to mechanically perform in team fights, where I always felt like that was something that would just be second nature. Like regardless of what situation you put him in, he'll always be able to outperform. So did that worry you at all, or did you view that still as victim of circumstance?
I mean, partially we obviously thought about it when we reviewed some of the games. Like I wasn't as actively active in the hiring process because it was more like a top-down decision. Okay. But regardless of that, like I was still asked for my opinion. And for me, it's like, when I watch NA and when I've played in NA, because that's what I took into account, is that the routines that you have in NA are entirely different. Even the teamfight routines, the setups, the way people walk, the way people behave is so entirely like almost like antagonistic to what you're used to in EU, where like in EU you have like certain patterns, you're like, okay, this guy should flank, this is what should happen, like that's how we should play the team fight. We have to account for this guy, mark this guy, make sure that he doesn't do that. And like in NA, it's like everyone just it sounds like a meme, but it's like slightly ARAM-y. It is definitely an ARAM to a certain extent, and people are overplaying certain priors all the time. They're like, we need to get 4-man prior right here, and then like 4 people walk on mid lane, and suddenly it's like basically a dance of a mid lane. And like in EU, like for example, these patterns would be completely different. So I think you needed probably more time in NA to actually get used to that pattern. I think for Sven, for example, that has now been established where I think he's now performing really well, but his team is also
they can play side lane. Yeah, they can play side lane. So
and they're playing a European style. So I think it's like it's so hard to say. And I think in his case, like we obviously have to give him partially the benefit of the doubt because he has been a great player in EU for so long. And I give him the benefit of the doubt that I think he was victim of circumstance also by my own experience. Because when I was in one of these, like this, I mean, I had some bad games, like to be fair, so that's on me too, but it's also the patterns were completely off. Like I remember so many games where it's optic where I felt especially where I felt like why are you even contesting it? Why aren't we just like pushing silent first and rotating mid lane? That wasn't on anyone's mind, and certain times the team fights just became more front to back engaging every single time, and it's like it's a dance-off that we're not used to anymore because we've already, like, in EU, and I don't want to sound cocky or anything like that, but exceeded past that point. Like, if people contest form in mid lane, well, then send someone in the side bush, don't make them show, make them guess where he is, you know? Like, so that means we can now get silent prior. So, like, these kind of things are not happening in NA, and I think the play style is almost archaic to the point where it's hurting individual play. Like, that's what it is.
So
I actually have something to say on that, because this is one area I think that it does get really lost, because the problem is, here's how the paradigm goes if you're a top European player, right? NA is worse than us because, you know, at Worlds they do worse and they haven't had like any really elite teams that were going to win Worlds or MSI, etc. So the logic goes, since they're just worse, if I'm good and I go over there, it's going to be easy. It's like, no, that doesn't make sense at all, actually, if you think about it. What that means is, why are they worse? Right? Okay, I'll agree. Probably the average player level of NA players is worse, but that's not even relevant because half the players, I mean, most of the players in NA are imports. In fact, a bunch of them are really good Europeans. Mm-hmm. So it's obviously a mixture of style and how they're coached. Well, the reason why a European should be able to understand this principle very easily, because if you follow European football, so soccer if you're Americans, the different major leagues in Europe are radically different. They're not as different in the modern day, but like especially in like the 90s, they were famously super different. So for example, the Spanish league, probably the most similar to how it ever was, their style of play basically is we're all like just attacking all the time. And the logic is, if you score 5 goals, I'm going to have to score 6. Now that's crazy, right? Because if you went over into Serie A, which is the Italian league, again, it's a little bit looser now. They've obviously changed defensive rules, but the classic example was, it was the opposite in Italy. Italy's whole approach, in fact, it used to be reflected in their national team, is if we score 1 goal, cool, you can win 1-0. So 11 men behind the ball, we're just going to defend all the way, and they would obviously use like zone defense concepts. And the point is, in Italy, it was insanely hard to score even more, like 20 goals a season. You're a god if you could do that. Then if you came to the Premier League, this is before it became like the big money league. Premier League was kind of like old school football. It was like, right, you kick the ball over the top, and you have like a really good striker. You have the 4-4-2 set up every time, and then the really good striker heads it in or tries to just like go one-on-one with the keeper or something. Like, it was just old school football. Well, the point is, over the years, like, each division had to like tactically adapt, and then obviously when you got all this influx of players, that maybe changed it over the years. But as a result, like if you went from one league to another, there are very famous examples of players who went, no joke, from like really good to shit. Like, I'll give you 2 good examples. There was a player who went, it was a Spanish player called Forlan, who went to Man United. I think it was Man United he went to. And so obviously he went to one of the top clubs in the Premier League, and he was fucking garbage. He literally could never score. Then he went back to Spain, and he was like, literally, I think he was putting like 30 in a season. Similarly, that's one of the reasons why I always think when people have that GOAT debate, like Messi versus Ronaldo, this is where people are terrible, because everyone uses what's called single factor analysis. They just do something like, well, this guy scored more goals, or this guy won more championships, which is terrible for analysis. What they never bother factoring into that interesting discussion is Ronaldo played in all those leagues. All Lionel Messi did is sit in La Liga and just play that one style his whole career. Whereas I can prove that Ronaldo went to the Premier League, was amazing. He went to La Liga, was amazing. He's even in Serie A as an old ass guy, and he's amazing. So, like, I think that counts for something. Like, you have to take that into account. It's not as simple as one league is better than the other. Even if it is, the question is, how do they play, and why is that better? Because if you go to a style, this is obviously what you've seen with some Koreans as well. They're way better players than some of the Chinese players, but they went to LPL, and some of them became like benched instantly. Like, they could not play there whatsoever, even though it's not that they were bad. In Korea, they were the shit. Like, some of those guys just disappeared in a black hole when they go there.
Sure. I mean, I think of it, an example that we're seeing right now is Khan, right? For a while, Khan was one of the best top laners.
This guy was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he was winning championships in Korea, and now he's a bench warmer to Gimgoon, and no one would think that he was better than Gimgoon like 2-3 years ago. And I guess
can't fit that style is just done.
Yeah, and I guess to wrap it back into League, 2 players that I instantly started thinking about when you're referencing this were the 2 supports that we've seen TSM have that were just supposed to be these genius shot callers, right? So Yellowstar was one. Famous collapse here. It was pretty much like the end of his professional career once he came here. Went back to Fnatic after that, but that was like really nothing to really speak of, and retired after that. Obviously, he has a resurgence with EU Masters recently, but I don't really know how much weight we can actually put on
That's
that.
That's a half a meme, mate.
Yeah. I'm not as sold as everyone else on that. And then the other player is Mythy, right? Like, Mythy was the genius shot caller, and I mean, now he's stepped into a coaching role, but everyone in EU that you talk to respected him, and I thought that it would be interesting to reference Mythy because obviously we have somebody that played with Mithy before. So from your perspective, like, what do you think was Mithy's strength as a player like, and why do you think that didn't transfer over once he came to NA?
So Mithy's strength as a player was basically being that guy who's going to honestly tell hard truths. I think that's what made him like so good. So every time there was an issue in the team, he was able to identify it instantly. He was able to, like, I don't know if he had a feeling for it. I think maybe me and him like have some kind of like similarities in that. Like he had a knack for that. And so instantly when there was an issue, he was like, okay, this is going wrong. We have to fix this instantly. And in game, that also translated where like as soon as like he felt like the rhythms were slightly off, he was able to correct them within the moment because he already like based all his thinking on those rhythms. So like every rotation, everything that was happening in game was kind of something he knew how to do, and he was basically like guiding people towards it and like helping people out and making that happen. And what I think in NA it just happened is actually the fact that he was taken out of like that whole like him, like he was not himself anymore. He was not able to be himself. So from the stories I gathered, obviously from talking like to Mithy at some point too, and then from like hearing certain things about
Mike
like
Young.
Song in general, Mike Young, these kind of things. Like first of all, you have a jungler that is like he's a bit of a rookie. Like he doesn't quite know the high level game yet. So directing him takes a lot of energy, but he's so far away from actually understanding these rotational plays and like the actual like standard rhythm that Mithy plays with, that suddenly like Mithy had to overcorrect and like basically make him like play like he thinks the game should be played, and then like half the energy is lost, and then he still doesn't get it, you know. So what do you do at that point? I think then like all your strength is gone, plus the fact that like again the hierarchies in NA, like I don't know how it was in that specific TSM roster, but they're different, right? So what that means is someone like Mithy who's like really I want to do this way. It has to happen. Otherwise, I can't play the game. Like suddenly, like has to be silent or has to be like kind of like muted. You know, it cannot be the same person he was in EU. So I think him like having those flat hierarchies really, really helped him out as a player, because that's just something he's so used to, because he is able to dictate other people and telling them what to do and having them also understand, because the individual player in EU, while mechanically is already better, they're a lot more thinking about the game. Like I think the average NA player, and I don't want to trash talk them either. It's probably because of the endemic player base, because the player base in NA is like limited. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of OTPs. You have a lot of like, you have a lot of interesting characters in the high elo scene, and then suddenly you're put into the professional scene, and you have to suddenly adapt to like a high level gameplay. It's going to be dumped down. It's going to be slower. It's going to be like basically more simple. It's not going to be as multifaceted as it is in EU. So suddenly, like that whole thing is dumbed down to the point where it's all about just team fighting, and then like executing mechanically, but they don't ever get to the next step, which is basically like how do we approach this rotation? What do you do in this situation? Like how do we counteract this one? It's all about actually getting to the first step first, and that's partially not even happening. So yeah, I think that whole thing negated like everything that Mithy was as a person, and him struggling in A surprisingly didn't surprise me. Like it was like I guess I understood why that is, because he also seemed really frustrated at the situation like afterwards, because like I talked to him like basically just after like he was leaving the team, I think, and it was just a situation where he couldn't be the person that he wanted to be, which he has been throughout his career. Like just someone that's going to tell you you're fucking up, dude. You have to fix this. Like I don't know what the hell you're doing. And I think once that toxicity, that almost like that intrinsic drive, like is being how do I put this, limited, like maybe tempered down. Like how do you be yourself, you know? And I think that really influenced Mithy.
So toxicity is the key to success, is what I'm hearing here.
Dude, it's like the fucking Sith in Star Wars, isn't it? You've got to channel that shit. That's what people never understood. I say that like a meme, but I'm serious. If you have a Dardoch or Forgiven, these players where, like, I always say it like this. Doublelift's the best example ever, because if you really believe, like, I always say this as an example, right? If you really believe that just putting on a TSM jersey the first time, instantly, like, it was like he got baptized and God fucking forgave him all his sins and blessed him and made him like a holy, but he didn't. What happened was he was on a team where he had teammates he respected. He probably had people he couldn't talk shit to in the way he had in past teams. And I'm sure at that point in time when he started winning, it also made it so he wasn't as grumpy. He wasn't like making comments to people. I'm sure he was pretty much like 95% the same person he was on CLG when they said he was a toxic player. So what you really need to identify there is what was making him toxic in a fucked up way was his will to win, the fact he wanted to win. That meant that when he was on a bad team and he didn't have the communication communication skills to know how to deal with his teammates. It was misdirected, that energy, into like destroying your teammates. Now, he probably misguidedly thought he was helping his teammates. Like, if I tell this guy he's fucking up, if I tell this guy, like, you're playing like trash, just let me play the game now, like, that's going to win the game, right? It's like, no, now you're taking all your agency away from your teammate. Now this guy's confidence is shot, but you put him with players where they can handle that, or you're not losing. Suddenly that energy is what you want. That's the guy who's driven to win. There's a reason why he's won the most championships. So I think that's what you have to do with the difficult player. You can't say to him, we're going to turn him into fucking Santorin, just like the cool, nice guy. It's not going to happen. It's unrealistic.
It really depends on the situation too, though. Like I think it has to be toxicity in a way. Like I actually shouldn't call it toxicity. I think it's the wrong word. It's just the will to win. So I think it's like something has to be channeled like correctly, but it also has to be put into perspective. You can't just be, oh, you're fucking up, dude. Like everyone,
it has to be just blunt feedback.
Everyone knows that they're fucking up. Like if I run into 5 people and I die, like I will not look at my teammates and be like, do you guys think that I fucked up? Yeah, you did. Oh, thank you. No, it's going to be something more like, okay, you fucked up. This is what we want to correct. And I think that's like what's something like how to be corrected is like that specific thing that a lot of people don't do. And I think forgiveness, for example, like a great example in this regard, because I played with him like too. And like, he's great at telling you that you're shit, but he's not great at like finding the adaptation. And that's like the whole thing that like someone like Mithy, someone like Mithy, who's like the next step, like who's basically like you're fucking up, but I want to help you, like, and I really want to help you, and that's basically like what their intentions are, and that's how they are as people too. And I think, we shut it down so often, whereas it can be really, really productive, and it's to my experience at least the most aggressively blunt teammates were my favorite teammates, for example, because I could just talk to them like how I think I'm like whatever I'm thinking is or whatever's on my mind, I'm just going to tell them, and then they can take that criticism, take that feedback, and basically then become like better or like help me out in my ways too. So like it has to be directed and it has to be positively encouraging in the end. It has to be directed at something like that is progress related. So that's what Mithy was great at, and I think someone like to give like obviously the example like Forgiven is like despite him being like so good as a player, even when I played with him, he was like not great at giving any kind of feedback that was leading towards success in the end.
It's because he doesn't have like that's one of the areas where his problem solving skills were really poor. Because basically his philosophy is this: it's like, well, I told you you're fucking up. It's not my job to tell you how to play the jungle. Like you're the jungler. Like in fact, he would almost take it like, how dare you even ask that? Like that's disgusting. He'd always take like some personal offense to it. Whereas like in this case, as you're saying, the logic to a normal person is, well, if you're telling me I'm doing it wrong, okay, give me a break then. What should I do instead? But that was it. Like he doesn't realize that's not helpful to tell the person. Just figure it out yourself. It's like. Yeah.
Yeah,
well, you're not leader than I am.
To give my personal anecdotal experience with what I heard about Mithy from players was that when he was trying to like deal with junglers in TSM, it would be like he would be trying to like, let's say there's step A, step B, step C in a lane swap situation where like step A is being on the right side of the map, step B is like which order you're going to do your camps, and like step C is like which wave you're going to dive on or which wave you're going to try to like walk into the enemy jungle and control vision on, etc. Like he would be trying to micromanage like Mike Young on like step like C. It's like, hey, by the way, like wave number 3, here it is, like pinging it. This is the wave where we're going to like start walking in. We're going to either dive the turret, we're going to try to control vision, etc. But he would have to start microing Mike Young on step A, which he never had experienced before, where it's like, hey, I mean, we just fucking swapped top lane. We need our jungler to be on the top side of the fucking map. And like, that was so hard for him to start doing that. His mechanical play ended up suffering because he was having to put so much effort into trying to explain like the basics of those concepts to Mike Young. So
to be fair, those TSM rosters were not inherently bad, right? Like even the setups were actually not bad. I think if they just were more honest about like the junglers that they had to hire in order to basically be successful, give someone more agency, give someone like, honestly, hire someone that has like a voice, right? I think like the season 8 team, if you think about it, Sven, Mithy, Hansa, Bjergsen, like and like it doesn't even have to be ex-Mithy. It can also be like a Meteors, whatever it is. Like Jesus Christ, there's no way that team wouldn't win NAS. Like it's almost impossible.
Has to.
Yeah.
For sure.
The only thing is, famously, supposedly, Meteor said something funny enough, quite similar to what Kha'zix said, who ended up joining the team, which is like, he said he never wanted to join TSM because he'd heard what the environment could be like, that it could just be complete shit and people blame you. If you know, like, Meteor said, doesn't really feel like the sort of environment he wants to be in. But I agree. I always said that he was the person who should have been on TSM because he's self-directed. Like, it would just take that whole problem out of the equation. This guy knows where to be. You don't need to coach him at all. You just have to get out of his fucking way, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that could definitely work, and like Xmithy would have been another good example, like someone like him, obviously, and then like even, I mean, obviously you kind of like you just screwed yourself by actually like hiring 2 imports without actually thinking about the jungle situation properly. So I think in that case, like, and that made Mithy suffer so much where at that point, like he was unable to direct people like in a productive manner. I think he just became like a liability because of it, you know? Whereas when he came back to EU, I think he may have actually gotten through a similar like situation with Cold. And then like at the end of the season where like in the beginning, like I think they really understood the game well in season 9, and suddenly like the game slipped away from them. And suddenly Mithy's play was again, like, because he couldn't fix anyone because everyone was like playing somewhat bad. He was unable to direct the team anymore because he didn't quite understand how to do that at that point anymore. And then it was lost in transition, if that makes sense.
I actually think that TSM team, if you remember the timeline, I think that was actually when people started to swap to the modern philosophy in the off-season, where now you get like the NA talent set and then you get your imports. Whereas that was when you used to just spend all your money, you get the best import you can, and then you just were like, right, well, we've got our 2 imports in the bot lane, so we better get jungler from it. Like, it's like you did it as an afterthought. Whereas I think people saw from that team and some of the ones of that era when franchising first started, like that's actually the worst way to do it, because the problem is you might get awesome imports, but then you might just fuck up the other roles so hard by having to take a risk that the entire team collapses. Whereas if people know in the off season, jungle and support literally defined the entire off season because it was based on who you were going to get.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to just jump on quickly, and we don't have to go into this in depth, but obviously you played for TSM. You were a jungler for TSM a while ago, and there's been a lot of like testimony recently about like the extra stress that comes with playing for that team, specifically jungling for that team. Did you feel any of that back in your time? Like, were there any problems in terms of 2014 with like the heightened level of expectation, or just like was the environment poor for you to function in any way in that season, summer of 2014?
I was too not knowing about the game to actually say anything negative. I think for me, it's like at that point I didn't know anything about the game, like per se, besides my own EU playstyle that was like really individualistic. Because I came from a team that, like,
you were on a bad team. You're on a bad team.
Yeah, I was on a bad team, so like I had to learn a shit ton. Like, and for me, actually, that whole environment, especially under Reggie's leadership, and like with growing up with Bjergsen to a certain extent, you know, because we're really young at the time, was honestly, to me at least, like the greatest rate of improvement I've ever seen in my own career. Even Origin didn't quite match that in terms of like how fast I improved at the game, because every single week Reggie and the whole team came up with certain things that were so like entirely changing my mindset and entirely changing my ability to a heightened level that I actually appreciate every single moment of it. So like for me, I welcome the stress, because for me it means like if I'm under stress in this kind of way and like all my teammates are pulling the same weight and they want to be under that stress, I love it. I love it. That's like it's one of the greatest feelings. It kind of led to me being burned out though, so maybe that kind of played into it in the end, you know, because at the end of the year, the reason why I didn't want to come back and like actually wanted to leave is not because like I mean it was partially because I missed my family, obviously, because I was still really young, but I was just like I was just done. I was just done after half a year of like enduring that on like really getting to that level of like play where we could match the grades of the world. I mean, maybe not Samson White, but that's another like a theme.
Hey, you guys got a game off them, right? So
yeah. So I was just really burned out at the end. That's when I felt like maybe this isn't for me, and I need more like agency, I guess, or more, less. I guess maybe slightly less stress. But to be fair, I kind of regretted the decision despite my success, because I feel like that the environment that we had with Bjergsen like was really driven. Like even with Dios, is like when I came there, he was kind of demotivated, but at the end of the year, he was actually good at the game again, and he was actually really motivated. And that's why coming in, okay. He was like, so like I felt like everyone was so motivated. So I actually regret that, because I think if I stayed and would have kept the same amount of like rate of progression, I think we could have become like similar to that season 6 TSM team in the end, you know, where like we had the same kind of like ability to potentially contest like or have like a background name where it's like, oh, they could make it to top 4, whatever it is. I think it would have been the same actually for me, like just as would have been with Origin.
Mm-hmm. So One thing that we talked about earlier that I thought that you could give some personal experience on was how when there's multiple different personalities within a team in NA, the hierarchy is like kind of different, whereas EU, it's mainly on an even playing field is what you've described it as, like where teammates kind of see themselves as equals. But in NA, like if you have like superstars or players like that, you normally have to play towards them. Did you experience that with like 100 Thieves? Did you feel like you had to play more towards Bang than, for example, like Fake God because of his status, because he was former world championship, etc.?
Gladly not at all, because it felt like that Bang wasn't. So the things that certain players are more vocal, and I think that's like maybe what plays into the whole like superstar role, right? I think in NA it's like that certain superstars are there, or like they have been there for a long time. That's why they're established superstars. So that's why they have their own opinion, because they're usually franchise players, right? For example, in Bjergsen's case, that obviously makes sense. But in Bang's case, it was more like because everyone was on the chopping block at some point, like no joke, everyone could have been kicked. Besides, the only one that actually didn't get any tryouts, like or like with the position that didn't get tryouts. Was like I didn't have any tryouts in one of these. Like everyone else, and that's what people don't know is that like in week 2, 3 when it was like really, really bad, right? Like when we were 0-5 or 0-4 to begin with, after week 2, we decided to try out everyone. Like so. Stun was playing, like everyone was playing, right?
Who was the backup AD carry at that point?
Prismal.
Oh,
so everyone could have potentially been playing. So I think like that in itself helped, at least in one of these, to actually like keep the playing field a lot more even. I would have actually liked to take more, have taken more agency and actually become that, I don't know, superstar role where I could have just dictated whatever is happening. But it never happened. So in one of these, it was more like top-down driven. So Prolly and I guess also like the support staff was basically ones dictating certain things and like what was happening, which is good and bad, because like I think player-driven teams, generally speaking, do better in most cases, because the inherent ability to perform on the map is like you don't have active coaching, right? Once you're on the field, like once you're on the rift, like your coach is not screaming, by the way, rotate top. It's not happening, right? Like so, I think a coach knowing more than the players is like generally, or like having a lot more power than the players is generally not advisable if you have potent players. And I think in one of these, it was kind of like the opposite, where I think that balance was slightly off. I mean, Polly tried his hardest to get the team rolling, and I think we had some motivation issues too, but it wasn't because like I didn't have to play to Bang at all. It was optional. It was, and Polly made sure of that I never felt that, and no one else felt that. So I think in that regard, it was more like we made the wrong choice at certain times, and people were just like, I mean, was a lot of things to unpack, you know.
Was there ever like a moment?
Tom, do you think if he was on TSM, he'd have to play to Bang? I'm joined TSM. I meant I didn't set the joke properly there, did I?
It's okay. If I mean, maybe if Bang
was on,
it was innuendo.
Look.
Okay, I have to rephrase the whole top down thing though. Like in general, like, I don't think it's that much. Like it's partially up with the superstars, but I think the coaching staffs are slightly more enabled, because I think there's just more money at stake in NA. So the whole thing, like of like when an organization like is like investing, like they're investing like 30, 40, 50 millions into the team, like to build the facility, build these things, you know, and suddenly like you allow like basically the player who's kind of almost at the bottom of things, you know, like if you think about the whole relationship between player, coach,
sure.
CEO, CGO, CEO, owner, right? Like that whole balance is like completely different in NA to it is we're compared to how it is in EU. So the players are like maybe in most cases actually slightly below the coaches, if not just inherently like entirely below the coaches. So I think the top down is more like directed at like first the coaches, then the star players, and then like the rest of the team, you know?
There's also an angle where, like, the problem is, I know this from having been in my CSGO project, Flashpoint, most of the orgs are North American. It's North American people who, they are still looking to sports as the model. In fact, some of the people they're bringing in for, like, organizational people are from sports. And the problem is, the reason why some of the sports concepts don't work is because, like, it's going to be extremely rare, aside from, like, devastating injuries, that, like, a superstar point guard in the NBA just can't even pass the ball next season. That's the equivalent to what happens with some of the crazy drop-offs league, or the meta just switching out completely. So if you've really built your team, well, like you're saying, you've invested millions and millions and millions, right? you're literally de-incentivized to ever consider a world where you should bench Doublelift because he's won you all the championships, you put all your money in him, and you want him for the future of your team. So everything in your brain is going to tell you don't solve the problem by benching him. Whereas if you literally treated it like you're just the player in the server, nameplates off, you'd bench him instantly and you'd go, right, until you've earned your way back in, you don't get to come back in. So actually, unfortunately, the outside of the game stuff in that scenario doesn't just intrude, it can actually block what you want to do in the game as a coach.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. Like, if we think about the sports, like in general, like you have it even in the NBA, where it's like so many teams are basically like they have to respect the superstars. If the superstars not respected, it's a moneymaker, right? It's gonna make the people come and watch, And the issue in League is also, and that kind of plays into it too, that like the coaching itself is a lot different to how it is in like sports, where, for example, in sports you can say, okay, shooting coach, please help this guy out. Like his shot has been off by 2%. Like you can't be like, oh, his accuracy has been off by 2% in the game. Like he has been right clicking wrong 2% of the time more than he usually did. Like you can't just be like, oh, assistant coach, would you please take care of that? Like what are the drills for that? What do you do for that? Like there's so many things that he can't control. So and that brings me back to my point. I think player-driven teams are usually better because of it, because coaches can't quite impact the same way that they can in other sports, I personally think, which doesn't take me out of my responsibility to coach, but it kind of I guess like puts perspective on like player versus coach, right? Where players like they can directly influence their play a lot better than a coach can at this current time, given the knowledge that we have, I think.
Yeah, though the one thing I was going to bring up was, I mean, obviously when you joined 100 Thieves, this was a team that was like relatively bad. I think they were either 10th place or 9th place in spring. It was like a doom team, right? And then you joined it. You joined the team, and I think the start was like 0-4, 0-5. Was there ever a point where you were like actually like super nervous? You're like, oh my god, we're actually gonna go 0-18. Like this is super fucking doomed. Was it like worse than you thought it was gonna be? How did you feel when you were at that point in your career?
So I think the game that really frustrated me, if I remember correctly, was we played against CG, and they played. I think did we play Sonateric? Yeah, we played Sonateric Azir or something like that. And I don't know, like they just did the most obvious plays ever. And I remember, I don't want to paint myself in a good light either, because like, I mean, I had some interesting games, to be fair. It was like, can you guys get Dove bottom? Guys, can you guys get Dove bottom at level 6? No, we're good. To get Dove bottom. Game is over. So it's like, that's when I felt like, either like, I feel like the players are not invested enough, or it felt like the people were so demotivated already from last split that they were willing, or they were okay with going 0-18. It's like they weren't even fighting anymore. It's like kind of like a guy that has already been stabbed 15 times. He's already on the ground. And he's like, another knife won't do no harm. It's like, I'm already dead. So they're all bleeding out already. So I think that's when I get scared. I get scared. It's like if nothing is changing, we could realistically 100% on back playoffs, like it's not going to happen, and we may end up like really, really terrible, and it may actually be worse than last split, which would have been terrible, like even more terrible for me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So before you actually joined that team, you've had a bunch of different like roles. I think you were like player coach or like analyst for a little bit before you joined Schalke, if I'm not mistaken. Then you worked on the broadcast a little bit. Went back to being a player, and now you're a coach. What exactly did you feel like you were like taking away from all those different experiences? Like, did you feel like, having some time as a coach before rejoining Schalke like made you a better player? Like, do you think that that's like built you into who you are today, or like how did you what did you take away from those experiences? I guess that's what I'm asking.
So before Schalke, when I became analyst on the broadcast, like I obviously saw just like everything from the outside. So basically all the players like being on stage and me not being there, and me just commentating, like analyzing the games, like made me just feel terrible. Like it got me an outside point of view, because it's like, okay, I'm now removed from the game. What do I actually want to do in life? Like, where do I want to be? And when I saw like all the players celebrating after wins and they're acting like, and just like being happy, whatever it is, I got almost like really motivated to just be the best player that I can be. And
did you have the fear of missing out?
Yeah, it was like, I felt like, especially when I watched the games, and funny story, I'm pretty sure Grabs can actually confirm this, because I think he tweeted at me too at some point, like when I made it to the finals. I told him like when I was in Copenhagen, I think when it was like when they had the offline finals when G2 played Fnatic, and in the after party I told Grabs, honestly, I can play at this level. There's no way I cannot play at this level. Like I can play at this level in the finals. There's no way I can't do that. And I mean, it may have been drunken talk at the time, but I knew that like if I put in the work and drive, like I can make it back to the finals. I can make it there. And it's like something that you just see from the outside, because like it gives you this perspective of being removed from teams that like the game isn't that hard. The game isn't that. People make it out like that, specifically speaking, like that. It's like, oh, you have to like farm 5.8 CS per minute to actually get to that gold value in order to carry the game. Whatever, so like 11.8 CS, whatever it is. It's not that specific. Like you make the right plays at the right time with the right shot calling. Like it's just like as any other sport. It doesn't. The differentiation isn't that big. Like you don't have to make it like that specific. The game is like, communicate properly, play the right champions, like make sure that the matchups are fine, and then play like the communication patterns out properly. So that in itself like gave me so much more purpose in the game again. Remotivated me to the point where I was like, okay, I now know what my role is and what I want it to be. Like it doesn't have to be the carry, the mechanical carry. It can be that guy that is going to get everyone on the same page and make that happen. And that's like what happened in 2018. And in 2019, honestly, I didn't want to coach. I'm going to be real here. Like there was no way that I wanted to be the academy coach for Schalke. Like no offense to Schalke, because like they treated me really fairly, like in general, and they made sure that I felt welcome there. But that was my intention. I wanted to play after 2018, and it's like that was like the depressing version of what I just said. Like the whole missing out. Like it was like I could at least like watch the people and be like, okay, well things are, this is going wrong. I could do this better. In Schalke, and the academy team was more like, I can't see anything, and it's depressing to be here. So it's like it didn't incentivize me further at all. It didn't give me a further perspective because of the position I was in. So like in Schalke, like at least as a coach, I didn't learn much, but as a player, like that I was happy with myself and like what I actually want to be in terms of as a player.
So if I'm not mistaken, you were replaced by Memento. In Schalke, and obviously that did not go super well. He eventually got replaced by Trick. So what was the logic behind that, or like what were you told? Was it just because Memento is supposed to have better mechanics, etc.? I mean, obviously you joined Schalke, and Schalke was not a team, and then you guys or not a really good team, and you guys ended up making it to finals that split. So what, like from your perspective, like what do you think happened? They just thought that they had more upside with Memento if they were able to like get him to do what you did in terms of pathing in the game?
So I think there were two things. So I think at the end of the year, like at least like I showed that like there was some. I mean, there's certain things that led to me basically being honestly like pretty bad in 2017 already. Like that had like a complete down year, which was partially health issues. Like it was actually like something where I had to battle through something that like I've also been vocal about. Like there was like at that point where I know that my thyroid kind of burned out, so like it was like an autoimmune that issue that came up. And I think in Schalke, like at least I started to figure this whole thing out because also diagnosed, but it still left me with severe burnout at the end of the year. So maybe that played into the decision. So I think that's part one where they're like, what is going to happen if he does this for a whole year? Is he going to burn out throughout the split? Like whatever it is. Could this actually be an indicator for the future? So I think that may have played into it. But I think the bigger case was simply that Memento was just like falling on good favor, like or having good favors with Dylan. I think that's about it. So Dylan, like I have huge respect for him because he's done such a great job with Schalke, and he also did a great job with the Fnatic team. But I think for him as a coach, he wants to have mechanical players that are kind of like just playing, like being able to execute his game plans. And he felt like, and I think I actually know that he felt like that I wasn't able to execute those game plans because of my mechanical almost disability, if that makes sense. So I think that was just an overestimation, because I think he got a wrong point of view from both scrims, like from Broxah versus Memento and from Broxah versus me. So when I try to play the game against Fnatic, right, what I try to do is like basically learn the game from them, understand like what are they doing, what makes them a first place team, and then I try to soak up a lot of the knowledge and like do certain pathings, try out certain things. And it was like basically I try to play for not winning the scrim, but winning like in terms of experience and understanding what they're doing. And oftentimes it worked because we became better and better by scrimming them too, So, but Memento, like as an individual player, like he was on a shitty ass team. But he has been on a shitty ass teams like for his entire career. Yes. And if you think about it, like at some point, it's not the team, it's you. Like if everywhere you go, like and you smell shit, like probably you stepped into something, and I think, probably it's you, So in this case, like I think he never had that developed ability of actually understanding game plans on a high level or understanding the game on a high level. So I think that may have been a factor where because Dylan got blinded by scrims where Memento was just performing well against Boxer individually, that like he thought, I can make this guy good in terms of team scale, but that's not how it translates. Like individual play, like it rarely translates like in that kind of regard, especially when you've been a long time player onto other teams. Like Junkos is such an outlier. Like, but this guy had to go through trial by fire for like 5 years before he became like a great player. But he's also shown glimpses of being able to play on teams like that had some kind of shot calling system that was functioning at a high level, CHJK 2016. So Memento never had that. And I think we just got blinded by the fact like that he was performing well against Boxer and scrims, and that influenced the decision. And it felt terrible at the time, and I still feel terrible about it because it was one of the most, like, honestly, like, dumb, hurtful things that I've encountered in my career, and I'm going to stand by it, that I felt like insanely just dumbfounded when I heard it, because like I told him, guys, if you want to replace me, that's fine, but and that was my suggestion at the time, get Code or Gilius, because I can help these guys. And Code was actually my favorite to actually like be on that roster, because I was like, Code, when I played against him, I actually lost most early games. I actually, like, he just outplayed me personally. Like he was just better. And I could admit that, and then I play against Memento, and the 2 games I'm playing against him on stage, I trash him. So like, and that's like when I was coming back from the analyst stuff, So it's like, if I'm being replaced, replace me with someone that beats me. Don't replace me with someone that I beat. So I think that's what hurt me. And I think in Memento's case, like obviously, like I know him a bit personally now too, like after interacting with him, and I know that there's a good intention behind all the things he's doing. But there's also like a limit to his own capabilities. And I think he discovered that within that Schalke split, whereas with the pressure of upset, like being vocal, whereas the pressure of like being on a team that just got to second place, like got to him, where like, dude, yeah, that's something you have to withstand, Like it's like, so many members that have had success in the past, like besides Abadage, like Upset was second place last year. Odo got to semifinals of Worlds. Ignar got to beat almost got to beat SKT, and suddenly you're suddenly on that roster with like 3 people that are going to demand a shit ton of you, and I think he got overwhelmed by that, and I can actually feel for him, because like he was not supposed to be in that position to begin with, because he couldn't like properly handle the pressure if needed to be, because like it wasn't his personality type. He never actually saw this in his entire career, because every time he was playing for any team, there was no pressure. Everyone could be shit. If he stands out, it looked good.
And the team was going to lose anyway. So, like, it looked always like, he doesn't get a chance to play the game. He did this great early game. It's not his fault. But the point is, as a result, we all just took for granted, like, but he would have been good. It's like, we don't know. We never had a chance to do it. Another player I want to ask. Basically, yeah. Another thing I want to ask about, right, was people will forget the order of this. But when you were actually in Fnatic briefly, where they had Soaz and all those guys, right? This was when you got like benched, and then when you left, you actually publicly made some comments where you basically said like, I didn't want to be in the team if I was just going to have to like train my replacement, which was going to be Brox, I believe, right? Am I thinking correctly? Is the timeline right on this? Yeah. So here's the thing, right? I totally get that on your end, but the actual sad thing about it, when you consider the way both your careers went, is I think you could have actually done so much if you actually had been sort of like, I know it wasn't your job as a starting jungler, but you actually could have done so much for Boxer. I feel like that's an area where I look at his career. I think he needed a veteran jungler to help him, because he has the skills for it. But the way he's had such an up and down career, to me, is he's been thrown in the deep end with all these fucking super veterans and people who just expect you to know what you're doing. They don't want to have to coach you, like they're playing top lane or AD carry or whatever it is. Like they just expect you to know what you're doing. And if you're on Fnatic, you don't get to have like the split where it's like, they made the playoffs, well done. It's like you have to win every split. If you don't, you're a failure. Yeah,
no, I mean, in that whole thing, like when that went down, like to be fair, it's my own fault in the end. Like I think I'm also like, my issue is usually as a player that I'm maybe even too open about the things that I'm struggling with, that I'm going through, that I'm like really vocal about. Like for example, if I have an issue with someone, I'm gonna tell them. And for me at that point, like, and I mean, like the whole Nico the Pico plus Coop situation, like I was basically told to help Brox out, and I was like, I'm willing to do that because like I thought there was no way that he's gonna replace me, And then there was some serious anti-coaching going on, which is basically like, you're talking to a team, you tell them things that are inherently bad for the team, and you make them play them out, and then suddenly they are shit, But like that's basically what happened. Like when I was in Fnatic, where like we had certain days, and there were certain days. There was one day I remember when Nico had to like go to the hospital, I think, because he had a nosebleed, and suddenly we went 6-0 in scrims against like one of the top contenders. It's like one of the biggest memes ever happened. I don't mind talking about it now because like he would probably deny it, and I'm fine with that too. At this point I don't care. But like there were certain things where like I obviously like was struggling with certain personal issues too. Like there were so many things that were just going wrong in my life, but I was still a decent player. I was still good enough to basically contest like for a top spot. And I think when I had to train the replacement, and like, yeah, like Boxer is a great guy, and he was again like someone that I would never take out of the issue. Like, and I don't want to paint myself as a victim all the time because like I feel like that's stupid too. Like I had my fair share of like I was an asshole at the time too, so that definitely played into it. But it's like he's great, and I think what need to happen for him is kind of like that whole thing that I went through with TSM versus Origin, right? When you have the change coming in from TSM to Origin, I had to take on a completely different role. For Rockstar, that's now the TL split, right? If you think about it. So What changed for him now is like that he didn't have the same comfort level of the whole scenarios, like where like everything was like put in place to a certain extent, like in Fnatic, where like he didn't have to do much to basically succeed. He was just there, right? In TL, however, it seems like that those things weren't in place. So he needs like to take leadership and take agency and control the game pace. And he never quite acquired that skill, but it's because he never changed teams before, and he was always in the same spot, the same kind of surrounding. Like the only thing that changed is like I guess in the end, like in season 9 is when Nemesis came on, so suddenly Caps wasn't there, and then we saw some of the struggles that Boxer went through because he couldn't individually like dictate whatever's happening in the game, and then suddenly like he fell behind and became a victim of like the actual like surroundings, because then he was dragged to this lane, dragged to that lane, and he wasn't decisive. And I think it would have done good for him to actually spend like a half a year or one more year like in the academy, like instead of like me just being replaced at that time, or us even sharing a spot, which I think I told them, like, I remember telling them too, like, if you guys do this, like, there's no way for me to come back, like, but I don't mind sharing a spot with him. But if you want to make that choice, it's what it is, you can do that. If he shared a spot with me, I think the two of us would have learned a lot, and I would have gotten out of that experience actually with something beneficial, would have been like someone to compete with, But in the end, like, the only thing I got out of it is like, don't make bold statements towards the coaching staff. That's the thing I got out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard...
I have a small anecdote I can tell you here, right? I'll be very quick with it, which is that when I did my second Reflections interview with Soaz, which was at the end of 2016, this is the year we're referring to here, right? And obviously, Soaz had Nico the Pico as his coach in Origin just before that, not the good Origin, the one just before where it was like the spring one where they managed to beat the H2K and all that, right? In this interview, I asked Soaz about like coaching. What does he think about it? Like, is he uncoachable and stuff? And this is what Soaz is like, right? He doesn't just flame you outright. It's just always built into what he says. And he's a very blunt person. So he essentially just sort of said, like, I don't really think I ever have been coached in my career. And I'm like, didn't you have like Nico and Pico and then that fucking Leduc or whatever that guy was? And he basically just sort of like, yeah. It's like, all right, well, that's the end of that topic then. Shift that over. Like, I'm not getting about the guy, but Soaz is. So,
I was going to say, like, dude, I've never heard anything positive about Nico the Pico. Like,
well, I'll tell you one positive thing.
I think there's something positive about him.
Caps, so if that's true,
no, he's a great talent scout. There's no denying that. Like he has an eye for talent, like Bripo, Caps, Boxer, obviously he had an eye for talent. And now the Fnatic Academy team that he's working with, apparently like they've also won UK, despite like all the things that were like not supposed to happen. And he's definitely great in that. But like veterans need different leadership, and it's like a completely different thing to coach veterans than to coach rookies. If I coach rookies, they don't know any better. Like, so what can I do with them? I can make them buy into a system, make them like aware of the basics, like, and everything like that, and build those up for them, But if you're a veteran, do you want to hear like how to rotate to a lane for the umpteenth time? Like, I don't want to hear that. Like, what I want to hear is like, what can I do better in this situation, because I already know the basics. And that's when Nico the Pico fell flat. And that's like some coaches, even in sports, are talent coaches, and they are able to bring that up. Some people are dealing well with veterans. Like you have some tank commanders in the NBA who are like, choo, like, we're gonna go 20-62, but at least we'll have star players in 3 years. And I think that's at least like what I think is great on him. And he's compassionate. He's really compassionate. So that helps with rookies too. But like, I don't need, like, for example, I don't need compassion. Like, I don't care about that. What I need is like cold hard truths, to someone telling me like I'm dumb, I'm doing stupid things, like this, what I have to fix, make sure that happens. And I think that never came through. And I think that's why Soaz may have struggled with him too, because it was kind of the same story.
Both veterans.
And yeah, so like, I think that's why he didn't feel like that was properly coached, because for him, like, most of the coaching that happened in Origin was actually done by the players. And I think especially Mithy and me did like a great job at like facilitating all the knowledge,
Makes sense.
Yeah. So just one quick thing I wanted to just ask you here is, after, like, I mean, you mentioned Brox's career and how he didn't like face enough adversity early on that kind of like that would help him transform or like become like an even greater player. And now he's dealing with that in Team Liquid. Obviously, Team Liquid had a failure of a split last season. They ended up in 9th place, and he looked relatively bad in that split. Do you think that this split he'll be able to turn it around, like knowing him, or do you think it's going to be really difficult for him to get everything back together and become like a top player in the region?
I think Doublelift being gone completely opens things up for him. I think it's actually great for him. I think now he's finally in the spot that he has to be, and now it's like swim or drown, And I do think that, like, I mean, when I see the guy, like when I talk to him, when I actually had interactions with him, he seems like someone that's capable of taking responsibility, which is already like a great ability to have. And I think he will swim. He will definitely swim. I'm not sure how good he's going to be in NA, because like the rhythms and everything like that is still off. But I would not judge him by this split, but if he stays at TL or on TL for another year, I think next year is going to be his breakout year. I think that's where he's going to shine. This year he's going to like get back to his form. Next year is going to be like top 2, top 3 potentially. That's what I fear.
I have one concern with him, which is I agree. Like for example, to me, losing Doublelift isn't the end of the world. I certainly don't think they'll be the best team. I think that's the problem. But like they have so much talent in the other players. They already have a championship roster even without Doublelift. So my main concern for Broxer is, I've heard from behind the scenes that in some of the past teams he's in, he does need sort of like people to direct him and to give him a lot of inputs so that he knows what to do. And if you look at the players he has now, he has a fucking Korean top laner who famously just plays like with whatever resources he has. He has a mid laner who, by the way, is way more in that forgiven category of like, you should just know what you're doing. Like, it's not my job to tell you. Like, on the one hand, I want all the ganks, I'm the mid laner, but you should just know when to do them. Like, and then his bot laner now is going to be a rookie AD carry. So like, that's the issue. Is this to me puts pressure on. Who's like the actual? It puts pressure on Jat and fucking Kin. They're gonna have to really do work, in my opinion. So I'll give them a lot of credit if he turns it all around and they become a championship team. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I forgot who the fucking coach was there for a second, because it's actually in the Jat.
Yeah, Jat now. Yeah, true. Holy shit.
Yeah, we should actually be talking to him.
That's not printed in there yet.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so weird.
It doesn't feel real still.
I wonder why NA puts such a high emphasis on casters to become their coaches. Like, I wonder why that is. Is it because...
Zabutin?
Yeah, I mean, Zabutin, then you have like Jet now. Like, I mean, I obviously don't know about the coaching ability of either, because I just think I haven't interacted with them enough, so I have no idea, But why is it that NA like, oh, you have been a broadcaster, so why don't you become a coach? Why is that? Do you have any idea?
I would speculate personally, right, that it's just that these people are all around the players and the teams and the coaching staff especially. And in fact, most of them, if you look at commentators, here's a little secret for everyone. If you didn't read my Kelsey Moser article, I basically sort of say it in subtext there. These people just get all their info from other casters and people and pro players. They just probe them all the time for info. And then when they get info, it's called being informed. They then actually are able to give an opinion that's even more insightful, right? They don't just sit in a fucking lab like Doctor Strange or something, just come up with all their theories on the game. Only weird cunts like me do that. So when they do this, right, in these conversations, when they're having brilliant conversation with the team owner or the other coaching staff or a pro player, it's so easy for that person to then think, this guy gets it. Like, he knows, he understands the way we want to play. Like, he's really smart about the game. Like, but the problem is that conversation doesn't necessarily translate to like, you'd be really great at coaching. Like, it's like, there's some overlap, I'm sure, but I agree. I think sometimes people do like overrate the knowledge in that sense, because the problem is when you're trying to have general knowledge like that, you're not really trying to do it the way that a coach does. Like, to me, a coach is you're channeling all your information into these 5 people. Casting's more like, I want to have a really nice broad thing, and then I want to pick a few people I'm going to go in on here, and then I have my own philosophy. But it's like, and also one other thing to say about casting is there's not really any like metric to tell how good you are. It does just come down to popularity at the end. Yep. So you can in theory be the best caster, but does that actually mean what you're saying makes sense or is right? We have no way of telling. There's no efficacy test for casting. It's just, does it sound good and do we like listening to it? If we do, you can say any old shite, freak, for about 4 years. And if we don't like you, you can't say any old shite, freak for the last 3 years.
I think it's also. I think it's also like they sound good, but the thing that I think it misses is like, are they progressive enough to coach a team? Because coaching a team is not just like saying like, hey, what's good right now? It's being able to like figure out like what is the future of the team. Like how is the team going to transform into some team that's going to like win an NALCS championship, going to win like worlds eventually. Like that's what you need from a good coach. And I feel like that is completely missing when it comes to like having a caster as a coach. I mean, obviously, I think the Jat is a better example than we've had in the past. Like, I would say the Jat is more knowledgeable about the game. When I listen to Jat, I've always thought he was smart about the game compared to somebody like Zabutin. When I've heard him briefly talk about the game in English, I haven't been super impressed with his game knowledge so far. He's never told me anything that I thought was riveting, or he's never told me anything.
To bring Iker in, that's swing and a miss. Like, that strike counts. You've got 2 more on Zabutin. So,
well, I'm just surprised that it's like that Optic has been so okay with mediocrity in general. Like Optic into obviously Immortals, same management, etc. Because
weird though, you know that thing I said there where I was like, if they just like you, they just tell you that you know everything the caster and they trust all your knowledge. Jat is the ultimate example of that. In as much as a caster, I think he's brilliant. He's always been one of my favorites. But when people literally, like when he comes as a coach now, or when he would comment on something in the game, because people like him, they would always apply a standard. They don't apply to anyone, which is, he used to be a pro player. In like fucking season 1, what are you talking about? Like he stopped at the end of like 2011. Meanwhile, if Don says something, they go, he hasn't played for years. In season 5, he was almost at Worlds. What are you talking about? This is local. By that logic, how can anyone say local doesn't anything? He fucking got 2 championships. Like you have to apply the standard uniformly. You like I do, or you apply to everyone.
Here's a fucking knowledge bomb. Jat is so goddamn old that when he finished his career, I'm the guy that replaced him. That's how fucking old Jat is. Like,
oh my god!
So we're going fucking way back with that. To change the topic briefly, I mean, something that I wanted to talk to you about was the idea. I mean, obviously everyone saw like the whole like memes with LS that came out of that, the whole groomer situation, etc. But I wanted to talk about the actual argument there, which is like
one person who does on the internet, right, Tom? Oh, okay, that's weird.
Yeah, no, exactly. I actually care about what people were talking about, which was the statement that you made that there's no downside to aggressive jungling, and there's obviously been different perceptions on that. That was the main reason why there was an argument in general. Malice is known as like this AFK farming jungler. He's like an herbivore jungler, whereas
just a general wanker.
Yeah, well, I mean, generally speaking, most of the LCS junglers right now are the carnivore junglers. They're playing a lot of Lee Sin, etc. The only real like farming jungler that I've seen in LEC would be like Xerxes for the most part. I mean, he's better on the consistent champions, like Karthus, for example. There's a lot of bans. Do you think that it's just like impossible to play that style? Like, how hard are you on the like aggression? There is no downside to aggression stance.
I mean, I already expanded on quite like a bit with both Veteran and Thorin, but it's like it is entirely dependent on, first of all, the situation plus also the meta. So I think the meta kind of establishes the baseline like for what you can play. For example, if a patch comes in that tells you, oh yeah, farming is more incentivized, like this patch kind of does.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's basically what you will farm a bit more. But it's not as black and white as people make it out to be. It's not herbivore versus carnivore. It's rather about like expanding within that field of like ganking versus farming, right? So depending on the meta, and especially when like you have more incentive, like there's more incentive to farm camps, like there's multiple ways to go about it. Like when, for example, lanes are aggressive and they're like most of the lanes that you pick are basically aggressive lanes, what are you going to do? Are you going to FK farm? No, you're not. What you're going to do is basically utilize those priors and invade. So that, again, like kind of creates this aggressive playstyle where you take away camps from the enemy and you basically make sure that he doesn't XP scale, right? So, and that's the same word, for example, farming is not incentivized and you have low XP camps and you have get a lot of kill incentive, then you're going to gank a lot. You're just going to be like directly interacting with the enemy lanes instead of the enemy jungle. So in metas, and that's like what historically has been like kind of like what I've been observing, and even as recent as season 6, when we had like there was real incentive for junglers to farm. Like if you remember the whole like what is it, like the 300 HP thing that you like
strength of the ages.
Yeah, that whole thing. And what happened is that like people actually became more incentivized to just invade and play aggressively onto the enemy camps in order to take away those possibilities for basically like farming from the enemy. So anyone that was playing an AFK farming style was suddenly invaded by a Grace or Kindred, and it's gonna get like not killed on his camps, but it's gonna get his camps taken away. So the thing is like the whole running on lanes thing, like I think that was more solo queue related, but overall every meta, and that's like what I've seen so far, usually brings like the most aggressive playstyle towards words, especially, and you will have the most aggressive playstyle possible pursued, because in the end, it's like if safe farming and playing like basically playing back, would be something that would be beneficial to most teams. And that's like by my call to authority, if you want to put it that way, most people would do it because they see it in scrims every single time that it doesn't work, because they're like, okay, if we AFK farm, we have this guy scale, then we have to pick certain laners that have to scale with him, because we cannot control the early game entirely. Because if, for example, the enemy top laner suddenly decides to walk on the wave level 1 and freeze you out, and your jungler is telling you, no, I can't come because I'm farming, like you can be stuck like being like fucking 10, 15, 20, 30 CS down. So and then like suddenly lanes are collapsing, and then you're going to be invaded on the jungle. So it's really hard to give like a definite answer, but historically speaking, which is like I think what I've been observing so far, is that every single time towards words, you will have the most aggressive, like most possibly aggressive playstyle come to fruition, and it's going to be the one's going to be pursued by most of the teams. And there's some outliers, but they only, I guess, they just prove the actual like the
exception that proves the rule, as
the exception rule. Yeah. So
right, Dom, I wanted to get your take on this, but I wanted to set something up first, because here's the problem, right? Since that whole thing just became about the person amazing on the internet versus the person LS on the internet, it just became a dog shit, like political tribal battle where, like, this is one of the problems. LS is a really interesting guy. I think in some ways he's a brilliant thinker, but unfortunately people like that also attract fucking morons who just follow them and just blindly like, oh, whatever he's saying is right, and then they just parrot it, and then they're not even knowing why he said it. So I think that just made the whole argument dog shit to me, because as far as I can tell, people just started trying to like win these petty little battles where it was like, well, we just meant specifically on patch 10.8. Like, he was talking about like
it was so fucking stupid.
I took what he said to be a topic about the general trend of League over the years, and that he doesn't like where it is now. Whereas people started making it like he's saying it about this specific patch now in a pro game in LEC in week 7. Like, I'm guessing he was talking, as he said there, about like solo queue and then a mixture of general pro play. So it's like he was talking about a very abstract point. So where do you want to attack this, Tom?
Well, I just think that
way you disagree for me.
Okay, so pretty much I do think that farming is more viable than a lot of professional teams do, and I think we saw this kind of towards the end of the Asian leagues, where like Graves became super high priority, even though Graves is generally a farming jungler, and just the amount of control that he offers. And then like even when Origin played Karthus, it looked really good, which is why any team that played Origin would just ban out the Karthus, because those champions do have viability in certain situations. Yeah. But I guess the one thing that I really hated about the argument is it just became like who is better at solo queue right now, and like Malice is linking like his account and comparing it to Amazing's account, and it's like, this is definitive proof that your style fucking sucks. And I just really like despise this over emphasis on solo queue in this community as to like what determines how good a player actually is. Like, almost never are you going to see the absolute best players in the region. Like, for example, right now, Blabber isn't the highest rated jungler in NA solo queue. He's by far the best jungler we have in our league. And I think that this is just like a really just stupid point that people really go to in these things. But yeah, I mean, I guess the point that I'm going to attack here is I think that teams have shown, especially with the Graves picks and LCK and LPL, as well as like the Karthus pick for Origin, that style can be really disruptive. You just need to like comp around that style. Obviously, if you early draft a LeBlanc, you're going to want like a Rek'Sai, a Lee Sin, something that can combo with it. But especially given like the picks that we were seeing a lot of, I feel like there were openings for this farming style, or just like more late game oriented style. It doesn't have to necessarily be pure farming, but like we saw Trundle as like one of the highest priorities this entire season. And I feel like the champions that exploit Trundle, Graves, Kindred, Karthus, like those are the types of champions that you can pick there. And I feel like we didn't see enough teams abuse that throughout the split.
No, I mean, I agree with you. And I think there are definitely situations where it could have been happening. Like, but all the junglers that you mentioned, I think that's like something people tend to overlook. Is that like most of the junglers are late game farming styles. They also have the ability to actually control themselves and be like somewhat safe in the early game. So Karthus, besides like his now movement speed nerfed, like has basically been something that's been a pain in the ass for a lot of teams, because he could safely get to level 6 because he even had the level 1 invade potential. So a lot of the level 1s were actually won by Karthus. So Karthus could actually like both safely approach the level 6 potential because he could not be invaded at level 1, if that makes sense. So because he can make the invading happen himself. So that whole thing, like, and that's the same for Graves, and that's like kind of the same for Trundle. handle. And so like these champions, I think they're partially outliers, but maybe I'm wrong in that too. Like maybe I'm just wrong that I still think that they're outliers because like they have this innate ability to actually do something level 1. And I think that's so inherently important to actually scale into level 6, because if your level 1 is fucked on a farming jungler, you're gonna like the issue is that you're stuck farming then, because you have to like recover that level, right? So you can never interact with lanes per se. So that whole like, oh, I'm gonna help you in this case because I already took my camps is not happening, because you're like, oh, I had to take my camps because I'm behind. Oh, and I have to keep farming. So like the whole interaction like starts to basically like completely fall away. So I think like certain outliers are gonna be there. I think Grace, because of his continuous buffs, and like I think he definitely got buffed a couple of times if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And like and then the face rush whole thing, like that he just became inherently more strong. And I think I wouldn't consider him a farming jungler. I think he's more like an aggressive, like kind of invade jungler. I think kha'zix is a farming jungler though. Like that's where we have to draw the line but like both of these champions have the ability to invade level 1 and do something level 1 and not be destroyed level 1. So something like Eve is not going to be meta, like just because like someone like Melis is going to be like Hecarim. Like if someone walks on him level 1, like what is Hecarim going to do? Like swing a sword and die? Yeah. So like there's so many things that you have to think about, and like we have to like step away from like generalizing. Sure, in an ideal case scenario with a scaling jungler that has the ability to defend himself at all times in the game, you will have more consistent outcomes because you're going to be able to basically outmatch the enemy jungler. You're going to have more XP, and if every lane plays well, you're going to outscale, right? That's a good argument, and I think that actually plays into practice. But that's like 2 out of like maybe 20 jungle champions that can play that style, and like 2 out of 50 jungle champions that could potentially play that can play that style. So I think we will see more control junglers, and I think I would rather call them control junglers than farming junglers. And they're gonna be invade heavy, and they're gonna try to like basically disrupt the patterns of the enemies, try to take away some camps in order to get an individual XP lead. Sitting in your own jungle in the end, like, and having the enemy jungle sitting in its own jungle, what is gonna happen? Like the team that's gonna outscale, that has a better draft, is gonna win. Like, and then we're back to the argument like better draft wins. Like where there's no upplay potential anymore because both junglers are just stuck AFK farming because they can invade the main jungler. And then like, or I guess better coach wins, or better lane. And a lot of the teams, when they see the individual talent on their roster versus another roster, they're not going to be like, yeah, we accept that. I'm okay with this. You know, that's not going to happen. They're going to be like, okay, we have to disrupt this again. And then the whole cycle starts again. And there's so many things that like we have to consider. And I think like taking practice out of the argument every single time hurts the theory itself, because then the theories are like just unbased.
I always say it like this. It's not that, like, I definitely agree with LS that it's not that because pros don't do it, it doesn't mean it's like it's wrong or it doesn't work. Obviously, pros sometimes themselves are behind the curve, or one region does something and another region doesn't. But the idea that like every jungler in pro play is just too dumb to execute this, in that case, it's not a good plan, or it's too good a plan. Whichever one you want to pick it. But that doesn't mean, pretty sweet, if everyone can't do it, it doesn't make sense to say that like you're an idiot if you don't try it. That's one of those. That's why. I mean, we've done this argument a million times, but basically, that's why doing things in theory isn't that great, because life is almost never like in theory. Like the perfect draft will never exist, because even when you get to that position in the draft, for all you know, that day, the player who does play the thing you were about to pick in the most perfect comp to make your fucking Exodia goes, I'm not feeling that today. Actually, I want Nami instead. It's like, well, then you're fucked. That's the world of a coach in a nutshell, right there. There is no fucking perfect. What you drew on that whiteboard is almost never going to come to reality in the draft or the game.
Mm-hmm.
How would you actually dominate? How would you consider? Like, would you consider Xerxes a farming jungler per se? Like, because that's why
I would consider him like a risk adverse jungler in general. Like, I don't think that he's going to make he's going to go for majority low risk high reward plays. Like I made a joke on Twitter today about him. I don't know if you saw the Destiny tweet where he's like, oh, he took a picture of Xerxes and he's like, oh, Xerxes looking for crab in the river or something, because he was like out by a creek or something, and I was like, oh, that's the farthest up he's been the entire fucking season. So I said something like that, but I just think that he is somebody who wants to he wants to be really efficiency focused in general. Like he wants to make sure that things make sense for him. So he's not the type of person that is going to innately want to sacrifice camps in order to protect lanes on timings. Like he'll do it if he's forced to, but he wants to make sure that it's 100% the right call, and that's going to be something that you're going to have pushback with, as opposed to somebody like Yankos, for example. When we watch the finals of G2 versus Fnatic, he's just like, oh, we have a fucking enchanter lane that needs to push out right now. He's just fucking tri-laning with them and making sure that they can just somehow get the push out because he cares so much about like lane states. Another player that plays very heavily for lane states has always been Smithy. He's always been willing to like sacrifice camps for things like that. So I'd always put him more in like the category, like Xerxes reminds me a lot of Meteos in the way he plays, where they both like have smart pathing. They go for like early aggressive ganks at times, but the plans are made around what makes sense for them and not necessarily like super lane focused. So I like, for me, he's kind of like a carry jungler in that perspective, but I just think that he's somebody that needs like impactful abilities. Like he's not somebody who I want to see on Lee Sin. I know he's played Lee Sin, Rek'Sai, at least he's played these things during the split. It's never something that I'm very comfortable watching him on. I feel like he's just better at understanding like different angles the different champions have. Like I remember his Zac play was something that I really was impressed with when he was playing in LEC, or I guess EU LCS at the time. His card display I think is like very efficient. He's smart about when he ults, etc. So that's just like his strength as a player to me. That's how I categorize him, whatever that is. And one quick thing I wanted to say before we jump into the other topic is I think that we will be seeing more like of the farming or whatever control junglers later, like in the next split. But I think this is mainly because of game fundamental changes. So I know people are going to go back and be like, look, Amazing was fucking wrong because like they're not playing as many aggressive junglers anymore. But it's like the game fucking changed. Like if people are too dumb to follow game changes, then yeah, they're never going to understand arguments. The game has now changed where between levels 9 and 13, junglers get more experience. So there might be more people trying to abuse that 9 to 13 power spike that you now innately have in the jungle just by existing.
Oh, and by the way, just as a quick aside, like, I don't mind people have, like, for example, if you're a top challenger player in any major region and you want to have discussions with pros and disagree with them and tell them, like, you know, I actually think you're wrong there. I think the game's playing differently, or you could do this in pro play. There's a way to do it where you could have a really good, interesting discussion there. And in fact, if you do it the right way, I think the pro might even respect you and engage with you on the level of, like, okay, well, I know in solo queue he is really good. Therefore, maybe he knows an angle I don't because I'm coming only from I'm trying to take everything into pro play that I know works. The problem is, what makes that whole Malice angle to me just boring is his whole angle is, he's someone who's, first of all, he's bad at trash talk because it's never trash talk, it's real. He clearly is just super about everything and he just says the nastiest things he can. That's not trash talk. Like, trash talk's when you're like sort of funny with it, you play with the idea, like you say something that's clever and mix it in there. Like, there's no joke there. And then secondly, he makes it literally not about like you're doing it wrong. It's like you're doing it wrong and I'm better than you. It's like, you can never say that to anyone who was a top pro, by the way, because you were never a top pro in any kind. And before anyone goes, he never tried to be. That's an absolute barefaced lie. He tried a couple of times. He's literally on the challenger team in fucking Korea. What are you talking about, you idiot? The guy moved from Sweden or whatever to fucking Korea, lived in like LS's basement, tied up there or something, trying to fucking become a pro. Like, you're kidding me? Like, obviously he was trying to be a pro. So the angle that he wasn't, he obviously was. Like, that doesn't mean that he never made it as a pro. Like, trying to make it in Korea is trying to do it on Nightmare mode. I'll say that for a start.
Yeah, of course.
But the problem with that is there's never any way where he can fail if he sets up that scenario, is it? Of like, well, I'm better than you because you failed in week 7 of LEC in like 2018. It's like, well, how could I have, motherfucker? You weren't even ever in an LEC game. That angle is so whack. And then what they do is they always do this little like misdirection where it's like they try to imply to their fans how good they are in solo queue now is what can be contrasted against the pro in the game. Motherfucker, I wish you would play in those HUK lineups Cadril was in as a jungler. That's nightmare mode for you, mate. You want to go and play in the LEC, hop on and have Smitty J as your fucking top laner and all these bots and have Selfie as your fucking mid, who, by the way, is your dream, remember, so you'd never be able to blame the mid because LS tells you he's fucking S tier. Like, clown, I wish you would. I wish you would. Yeah. You won't, of course. So you'll sit in your ivory tower where nobody can actually ever test what you're saying, and you'll think, oh, I won that one. It's like, you know that famous image of the White Knight where he's like, number of ladies who owe me the pussy or whatever. That's you. Yeah. Like, number of arguments I won with the pros. 17 now, LS. Like, we don't care. The currency of that is 0. Guess what? How many points have you got in solo queue? 900. How many in real life? 0. Shut the fuck up.
Yep. Man.
Anyway, that's the end of that. That's the one we want to out of that. So.
I respect that so much. I mean, shit. Like, I feel like Amazing would kind of categorize Tarzan into that same thing because Tarzan was the same way.
I was going to bring him up. You know,
Go for it.
Funny story. Jesus Christ. I'm actually still mad about this. Imagine the morning. So I fly in from Amsterdam to LA because I just got my visa and then I had to take a train home. and I had to take a train to Amsterdam, and I had to take a flight from Amsterdam to LA, go through customs, end up at the LA studio 1 hour before the game starts. 1 hour. 1 hour. I go into the studio, I play the game, I lose the game because I'm fucking tired. I'm inting it, and like, you missed your Javan ult was so dumb, you know? Like, and I'm like, dude, do you have any fucking idea what I just went through? Like, if you went through this, you would not even talk. I'm actually still mad about this because that's a personal issue, you know? Like, I came over flight. Like, what do you expect me to do? Like, to just like. I don't know, maybe I should have done the Michael Jordan way and just like smoke my cigars and like my whiskey on the flight. Maybe I would have just performed, you know, or I need to make it personal, you know, maybe that would work, you know, but like these stream, and that's like what I hate about this. And like, I'm glad that like Dom's kind of like, Dom was a pro player, so he's not quite doing the same thing, you know, he's kind of respecting the whole boundary, but like those, especially the toxic streamers, you know, like they're like, oh, I'm so good in solo queue. Like we had Night Bloom back in the past, you know, like we had Tarzan, we have Melis, we have like all these players, like all these people that think they're great at the game. Dude, like, please put yourself in the position of anyone in the pro play under the same scrutiny that they're under every day, under the same kind of circumstances every day, and go through the same road. If you can't do that, like you should really shut it, because like,
I think a lot of those players would break under the pressure. That's why they don't do it. Like, you think you're playing your one solo queue game or whatever, and like there's pressure because you have LP on the line. Go play in front of a couple 100,000 people. Do that, and then talk. I don't want to hear anything about any of these players being better than any fucking pros or being better than any people that were pros, because the natural progression of all these people to become pros was going through what you fucking went through. I was rank 1 before. I know fucking Amazing was like top 5 in solo queue in Europe because I was scouting his fucking accounts when he was coming over in season 4. Like, that's normally what happens. But for some people, they want fucking more. Like, being rank 1 in solo queue is not the end of your fucking journey. Yeah. It's like, you go rank 1, then you get into a fucking team, and then you try to be rank 1 in the fucking region in competition in your league. That is what you need to do to have any type of respect as being the best player in the league. That's it, or best player in the region.
The best example for this as well would be Xmithy, because the joke now is, I'll bet if Xmithy plays solo queue, there's a million people put him in a fucking dustbin.
He's diamond or some shit.
You give him like the Team Liquid lineup, they wouldn't be able to do any of the shit he's doing with that. That's why the guy's winning championships.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to find a reference like for professional sports. It's like, you know, like, as if I was going up to Zinedine Zidane, you know, like, because I had like a good game with like randoms on a fucking soccer court, you know,
5-a-side or something. Yeah,
I'm the best, you know, like I'm the best, you know. You have no chance against me. You're fucking washed up, dude. That guy's like 50. He doesn't play for like 10 years. Like, of course, like you may win in this scenario. Yes, you would win, but like, please, like, make sure that you go through the same kind of scrutiny. Make sure you go through the same kind of road, and like extend that road. And I think that's a good argument by just saying like it doesn't end at top 5. It doesn't end at top 1. Where it ends is like once you're like at fucking Worlds, you're playing against like some kind of team that is gonna like if you lose there, like your year is over, your season's over. Like go through that pressure and see how you act, like how you perform in the team. That is completely taken out of the equation too, right? Yeah. Like all these people, like, do you think that Tarzan would function in a team? Like they would slap the shit out of him after like 3-4 days. Like if there's anyone with any kind of self-worth in there, you know, they would slap the shit out of him. No offense, but that's gonna happen. Like, and that's something that, like, I mean, obviously, like theoretically speaking, but it's like something that would, like, the interactions that would have would not be friendly, and he would not get his way ever, because that these kind of personalities are so toxic inherently that they cannot translate into the team sport, and you cannot. And that's what people try to do, because like that's something you can do in baseball, for example. You can say this is a individual sport masked as a team sport to a certain extent, because like the individual play matters a lot more, you know. But like in League of Legends, your individual play matters, but it's not going to carry a team if you're the one that's going to inherently destroy the entire team chemistry. Like you have 4 more players, you see that in solo queue, like it's already not working there. How is it going to work in competitive?
Dude, one of the best examples I would give, I'll give you a good basketball reference, is like there's been a lot of players who were amazing shooters in college or high school or something, and they think they're going to come in the NBA and be hot shit.
Yeah.
And basically,
they get muscled up.
Obviously, the pressure gets to them. Like the level of competition's way better. The defenses are better. And like it's famous, right? No exaggeration. every single team has a guy who's the equivalent of the scrim god. Like, actually, when he is in the practice hall, he can hit like 10 threes in a row like that. But in a game, he would miss like 3 out of 4 that he takes because it's so different. So if you've never been in that scenario, you can talk, but you're an idiot. You can't talk in the sense of you have nothing. It's even like these shows, these talk shows, or being on the analyst desk. Everyone sat at home in their comfy chair with their cat sort of half listening in, and then you hear a fragment of that doesn't make sense to you, and you go, that's wrong, I'd never say that. You don't know what you'd say. Like, I say this to people all the time. I've had people do call-in shows like this, right, where it's like a talk show and we just let fans come on. Most of them can't even explain their point. They can't even, like, they trip over their own words. They couldn't put a fucking joke in there. They couldn't like follow an extended point, because there's a skill to all of this. There's a skill to playing on a pro team. Like, one thing that none of these toxic guys would do is, right, even if they like were willing to play on a pro team, the first time they have a bad game where the pick that they have is somewhat forced by the rest of the comp, and it's not the one they wanted, and it's maybe even like a bad pick into the other guy's jungle pick, and they lose the game, but it wasn't even their fault. They didn't even make that many mistakes. Now imagine the world where they can't go on a stream or Twitter and flame their teammate. They have to just swallow it and let the whole world think they were the problem. They were the idiot. Or they come, right, as a jungler, they're a jungler that needs to power farm. And all of a sudden they have to stop losing the game, go and fix like someone's wave. And they go do that, but then they get behind and then they lose the game inevitably. And then everyone goes, oh, he even had a good matchup there. It's like, again, you have to swallow it all. You can't say, well, it was my teammate, he had to do that because he doesn't understand that match. No, you have to take that again. One of the things about being a jungler is you have to, it's professionally being blamed. Literally, unless you win the game. So I wouldn't want to do it per hour. I'd want to be like a fucking AD carry or something.
Oh man, no, I've had many experiences like that. There was one experience where they hard nerfed Jarvan. And I had to play into Rush.
A lot of the jungle stories involve Jarvan,
yes,
I've noticed, because the one that you're picking is like, oh, what am I going to do in this game?
Well, the thing is, everyone loves playing with Jarvan, but nobody actually loves playing Jarvan themselves, right?
Hey, I like it. It's
right.
Okay, I kind of liked it too. But generally speaking, the laners like it more than you like it.
I agree.
You can play Jarvan, right? You can EQ, and EQ is relatively hard to hit on Jarvan. Like, it's something that can be dodged, etc. But there's so much counterplay to it. You can play into games with a fucking Thresh, or just like Rek'Sai, champions that just fuck you like inherently. Like, there's so many opportunities to get fucked as a Jarvan. I remember I played into Rush, and like, generally speaking, Rush and I were the two people that were competing in season 5 for like the top spot in jungle. And
cool.
And this game we got invaded. I played Jarvan, and this was post nerf Jarvan. Everyone across the world dropped it, and we still played it. You lost 20 armor on your E at that point. And yeah. So we still played it because we had a Chinese coach. We loved Jarvan, and I was like, guys, I mean, I can play it, but like, it's a little bit scary for me. I got invaded level 1. I lost my whole top side. I got 3 quadrated. So I was level 3 to level 6 in the Jarvan versus Vi matchup, and Rush just took over that entire fucking game, and we just lost. And I just
you went overboard.
Yeah, and then I just literally have to like see Reddit threads. Dom was carrying every single game until Piglet goes in. Dom is clearly just inting the fucking game because he doesn't want to play with Piglet and he wants to play with Keith and Set. And I just literally read. And these threads are still there. Just comments upon comments of like how I have like this. I like hate Korean people in general, so I'll do anything to get Koreans venture my team. Like, that shit is so cancer to deal with as a pro player. And unless you're in that experience, you're not going to sympathize with them. But like there is like a depth of pro play, which is why even like when I shit on pro players, I'll always caveat it with like, okay, there's more to it. Like, and I'll try to make it obvious that I am joking when I'm like saying like super like rough things, because like, you don't really know the ins and outs of why people have to do certain things on that stage.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just got to do it for the memes too, you know? So it is what it is, you know? So you just got to insult them for the memes.
Yeah, no, I just hated Piglet, so I just fucking ran it on stage. That's how petty I am. Fuck it.
Yeah. I like that guy.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you think that I don't care about myself winning? Oh, I hate him so much that I want to int on stage. Oh, okay.
The reason why to the player actually makes sense is because I've even did a video where I essentially implied this, but the other way around. The reason that makes sense to them is that's the reason they're all stuck in bad elo, by the way. Because when they have a game where their teammate pisses them off, they go, to get back at him, I'll play really badly and throw the game. It's like, you just ruined the game. You're not going to be stuck in the elo. What you need to do is flip that mentality and go, the reason I now have to play awesome still is to get out of the elo he's in, because if we're in this game, he's probably going to do that next game, lose the game. You know the way MMR works, then you get out. Like, if you're not actually in that scenario, it's like that fucking like saying that apparently is not not actually said by the Buddha, but it may as well be because it's a great saying. The one where it says that resentment is like holding a hot coal in your hand. Like, you don't burn the other person, you just fucking burn your own hand.
Yeah. I mean, nothing to add to that.
All right, well, this is normally the point of the show where we open it up to guests, see if there's anything that we've missed on the show or anything that you wanted to talk about personally with us that you didn't get off your chest during this time. We're about an hour and 50 minutes into the episode, so yeah, is there any topic that we missed or anything that you would like to discuss before you leave?
We need to talk the Last Dance and the how to apply Michael Jordan mechanics to League of Legends, because that is just fascinating. It was just fascinating to me, and I wonder if like there's certain implications for League, and like because it's not just about like Michael Jordan's like on the whole team itself, because like the whole team was portrayed like beautifully. Nothing like obviously it was a bit heroically speaking, you know, like focus on Michael a bit, you know. But there's
by the way, Michael Jordan, the Last Dance. They made it like it was about the Chicago Bulls. It was about Michael Jordan.
It was not the Last Dance. It was the MJ. So like I'm just wondering, like, I mean, especially because you watch a lot more foreign, like is there anything that we like? I mean, I'm just wondering if there's anything we could take away as esports professionals, like from that kind of attitude, like, and from how teams are run, because I feel like that the way that team was coached, the way the personalities were basically like free flowing to a certain extent, I think something we don't see in esports as much anymore, and I think we see this in other games more so than we see in League. So I'm just wondering, like, should we all just become MJ? You know, like, is that what we should be?
I can think of a couple of angles. Like, first of all, one part that I thought was very interesting, and anyone who saw any of my Listen Local episodes, because we often talked about like the same topics over and over again, because, you know, some people didn't prepare. But no, just because we have certain things we like to talk about a lot, so forgiving, reckless. And so Dardoch would always be one, because obviously it was the what if Dardoch joined a good team. It was before he was in TSM. Now, whenever we talked about a Dardoch or a Forgiven, these players who have like famously difficult teammates, one of the things I often referenced was actually, because I've read a lot of books about that exact Bulls team and how they dealt with Rodman, right? And if people don't understand it, right, they might think, if they didn't know that they win the championship, Phil Jackson's a terrible coach. What the fuck? He let Rodman go to like Vegas for 2 days. Yeah. And then after that, he doesn't even bench him when he goes out drinking and doesn't turn up until the morning. He's obviously just being in shit. No, because here's the thing. What Phil Jackson understood, and this is what made him a genius, actually. Yeah. No other coach in the entire NBA, by the way, would have put up with that behavior. The team Rodman was on before was the Spurs, by the way, who were one of the best teams in the league, but because their team was literally all based around the fact that like they were all about like professionalism, and fucking David Robinson was a literal like super Christian who believed like, you know, you should be like very professional, very moral. Like when they saw behavior like that, they would literally just bench Rodman, tell him like fine him and stuff. And as a result, he never responded in the way they'd want. So they just denied themselves his talent, right? What Phil Jackson realized was this: like, I'm never going to stop him doing that shit anyway, right? But if I somehow make like the box that everyone's allowed to be in for him so big that he can just fit into it while doing all that stupid shit, because he also will in the gameplay really seriously, we'll just get all the benefits of it. We'll get none of the downsides and all the benefits of it. So I would just say, when people have a player like a Forgiven, like a Dardoch, don't ignore the upside of it, right? And go, well, I wouldn't let just a random player do that. Yeah, but that's not why they're in your team. You knew that before you got them. You got them for the massive upside, for the talent. So what you need to figure out instead is, how do I make it so that the downside doesn't really impact as much, or all we get to the upside? So in the case of someone like Forgiven, for example, I mean, they actually inadvertently found it in H2K. You don't have him live in the same fucking place as the rest of the team. You maybe have someone who communicate, you know, you do, as much as it sounds mad, well, an AD carry, because the pleb's already going to go, an AD carry shouldn't have to do it. It's like, no, but this is with Forgiven, though. We're not talking about just any AD carry. If you want to go get any AD carry for free, you do it. If you want Forgiven, though, you want all his upside, right? So then you've got to make a circumstance that works for him. What do you think on that?
I mean, I can talk about that. Like, I think it's inherently too. Like, there's so many times when like certain players, like for example, like, I mean, if you think about your path, for example, Dom, like when you like start playing League of Legends, like how you came up, like what your personality was there, like how you acted as a player, how you acted as a person, right? Like suddenly when you moved to a gaming house, a lot of that changed, no? Like a lot of that changed. Like it had to be changed. So I think like oftentimes we're ignoring that whole thing, and we're forcing people into certain stereotypes that we already like occupying our minds with, and we're like, this is what he has to do, this is how he has to be, this is what we expect of him, even though the player may be completely incompatible with that. And I think like what the Last Dance at least taught me is that like certain players need certain freedoms. And I think even in my career, like that's why I think I may have been a controversial person, is that like I have a really strong personality. I have a really specific personality.
People can tell by the way you talk is by how you're on shows, right?
Yeah. So like I did,
right?
Yeah, I definitely have that. So for me, like for example, was in TSM, which is why I didn't mind it as much as other people, is that like Reggie understood to a certain extent that I needed to vent a lot of the times and be like, no, we can't do that. We can't do these certain things, or like whatever it is. Like there were certain things that I had to do and I had to have for me to actually function. And surprisingly, out of all the people, because like Reggie, like if the TSM culture gets a bad rap, it's like Reggie understood this beautifully. And which team like then kind of acted upon and maybe gave me too much freedom is like Origin, where we're like, okay, there are certain things I need to do, and then there are certain things that Source had to do, Peck had to do. So the box became like
5 fragments. Yeah, exactly. It was like we all just do all shit, then turn up in the game and play right.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we've heard some crazy stuff about Rodman. I mean, we heard there was a story that he told where he had like a game the next day, and in between the game, he flew out to Vegas to like meet up with Madonna or something, and he had like some relation with Madonna,
like a finals or something. What people don't know about him, by the way, this is no exaggeration, is as an athlete, he was actually one of the best to ever play in the NBA. As in, literally, this sounds mad. He used to play a basketball game for the Bulls, and after the game, go in the dressing room and just bicycle for an hour because he just had like this insane energy level that like a normal human. Remember, you get tired even playing full 48 minutes. That's why most players, they forget load management. You'd never play 48 minutes usually anyway. I think it's only like Wilt Chamberlain did that. So like people don't know this guy. That's my point. That's why I pick him as the example, because it's not just a rebounder. It's someone who's like actually insanely amazing at what they do. And so you just want to limit the downside a bit.
Yeah, we're just like, and the issue is also, like, generally speaking, we have no idea to like, how do we actually measure someone working hard or working positively for the team, right? Like in the end, like it's a wins that they put on the board, right? It's like basically, do they make my team win? Yes or no? If yes, like how do we cater to that? What do we do about it? You know, like make him fit into a certain system, be like, okay, you have to do this, you have to do that, or you're fine, or you're fucked, or whatever. It's like, can we actually do that? Or is it better to actually, in some cases, to have the guy free flowing? And I think like, I mean, if you see the whole Bulls team, what I found interesting is simply the fact that they were so inherently self-driven that they didn't need outside rules to basically just be like, oh, you can't do that, whatever. It's like you have to fit in the system. That system was so free-flowing that like nothing had to be actually done for that team to function, besides like certain motivators, I guess, like and Phil Jackson just playing that like guy that was like facilitating, you know.
He was like the grabs of the team in some ways, right? He just made it work, yeah. And he knew when to get out the way as well. Like look at that last episode. There's a bit right where he says to Michael Jordan, like, switch off him defensively. He's like, no, I'm not switching. And he doesn't just go, well, I'm the coach. He just goes, all right, this is what we're going to do. He just switches it. He instantly has to change his own game plan in the fucking huddle.
Yeah, and like we just don't see it. And I feel like we don't see it in league enough. Like at least openly, where like we always have this insane, like almost like metric with which like we measure like how a team is supposed to function, how players are supposed to function, and it's almost inhuman the way that we're doing it, because we have this, and that's like I think where it stems from. We have the Korean pre-example, right? Where if you play 16 hours a day, you're gonna be successful. If you listen to your coach, you're gonna be successful.
Yeah, never argue, never complain about anything. Like things that are inhuman for most people.
Yeah, you have to like arguments, like all these things like that basically make us like the people that we are, inherently drive us as players and like drive us as coaches, drive us like in even a management position. And like
I'll give you a good example. Like you've played with him, so you know this. You know Reddit always, I mean, they might not now because he's done so well at Worlds, but you know Reddit used to always go so hard on Soaz and be like, oh, because the problem is because he is a whiner. Like I say that, at least first of all, he's French and he's Soaz. So if you know those two things, the Venn diagrams and not just whining 24/7. But it's just the way he talks. You have to understand. Sometimes he's not even doing it because he's really that mad. It's just like a minor frustration. And that really is his way of letting off steam. Like when he does that, then he can just go on. Like here's the crazy thing. The whole reason he invented the fucking dog champ thing. It's not that he didn't want to play, but he knew that those were the best champions to play. But by saying it's a dog champ and it's like sort of a bullshit game, he can then mentally go, right now I can go and do that for you. And then he would be amazing at playing the dog champions. Like some people just have like their own sort of weird idiosyncrasies in that way.
Yeah, and that's how they function.
I think that the coach that's been doing this the best has been Grabs. Like from what we've talked about, I mean, no one else would be able to like coach a team like that because it seems so like crazy. It's like, oh shit, like we have to let the players do what they want. They want to fucking switch roles. We got Wonder playing WoW, half the team's playing Magic the Gathering. Like it'd be like, okay, we need to grind out. And you know what, NA teams, like we have like really, really, really precise structure as to how many solo queue games you need to play per week outside of scrim. So it'll be like you need 30 games a week. So every player needs to like cross off these metrics. So I think that the thing that grabs us so well is he's able to like understand like when it's too much, like when people are being too loose with it, or when they're like fitting into that perfect pocket where you're going to get the most out of a player. And I think it's really just hard to perceive when you look at a player how much they specifically themselves need to put in to get like the maximum results out of them. I feel like that's just a talent in and of itself.
I mean, that's a very quick example. We actually had a player, I won't say who the player is, so you won't guess, I won't give the information, but basically there's a player in Counter-Strike who's a good player. I won't say how good again, so you can't guess. He's a good player, right? And he is someone where, given the opportunity, sometimes during events, he will go out and party for a night, even if the next day the game is 10 a.m. But I tell you what, the amount of times I saw him in the 10 a.m. games be actually like, you would never know he went out. And then, so first of all, in the game, there never is the impact. And secondly, if you knew him as a person, if you really said to him, right, you can only ever go out and party and drink when it's the off season, which in CS is like 3 weeks or something mental. I'm not joking. He would just quit Counter-Strike. Like maybe not initially, maybe at first he'd try and do it, but it would just ruin his life so much. He would feel so bored. He wouldn't get like, I think for some reason, it gave him like a mental reset to do that. If he didn't ever get the mental reset, he would either quit or he'd just become bad and he would just wash out the scene. Yeah. So as mad as it sounds, if you want that guy to be good, it sounds fucked because you wouldn't let the other people do that. But for him specifically, you almost had to. And so in his teams, they were smart enough that they sort of had like some coaching staff that were just kind of like his handler almost. They just took him places. They made sure nothing ever got too crazy. Then they made sure, he got in the bed, he got in the taxi, but then he would just perform in the game, so it was never a problem.
And no, it'd be crazy that Shox would act like that. I mean, whatever player would act like that.
Whoever it could be, yeah.
Yeah, whoever it could be would act like that.
By the way, I know the other angle he probably wants to talk about as well is like the Michael Jordan angle. So I've got a little something on that one as well, which is actually one thing they did an awesome job with in that documentary with the whole, because they do present, by the way, fair play to Michael Jordan, they at least did put in like the fact that he did punch two of his fucking teammates, Will Perdue and Steve Kerr. Like to put that in the documentary, considering he made it himself, he could have told them to skip over that. But one thing I did think that they nailed is a lot of that, right? I could tell people who've never been like a winner in business or sports, they were all sitting back going like, fuck that. Like I wouldn't want to be teammates with someone, even if he is the best, like that's bullshit. You can't treat people like that. But the one line that Jordan says at the end of that whole section, which I thought nailed the whole thing. And if you understand this, you understand how you can be a very demanding leader, is when he said, I never asked them to do anything that I didn't do. And remember, Michael Jordan, like Kobe, used to go before the games, work out, lift all weights, used to go before the practice, shoot his shots, then go to the practice with all the other players, then play the game. So in that kind of a scenario, right, like the guy who was being super harsh to in the whole documentary, Scott Burrell, is someone who, if you don't know, by the way, basically in terms of body type, just look at him, looks identical to Michael Jordan, but in the game is like a 10th of what Michael Jordan is. Well, if you know that guy isn't focused on the game or is just going to coast on individual ability or maybe feels intimidated by the moment, like, this is the key thing Michael Jordan was doing, even though he's coming off as an asshole, was he was basically saying to that guy, I'm going to take responsibility for whatever the result of this team is. So if we lose, that's on me. And if we win, that's on me. But as a result, that doesn't mean it's my fault though, dude. So when I say I'm going to take responsibility, I'm going to ride you like a motherfucker because you're the weak spot in this team. And if we break and you're the guy who gives up a possession or fucking doesn't practice and misses a shot, and I lose when I did all of the stuff I did, and I have to take responsibility for the result, I ain't going to let that happen. So I'm going to make it so you're either going to quit this team, get traded, or you're going to do your job. Now, that is a super harsh way to do it. But all I'll say is this. Kobe did the same thing. And there was an interview where he basically just said, there's all these narratives about me. People say I'm selfish, I don't pass the ball. He said, listen, aside from the fact I don't think you could win like 5 championships in his case if you didn't pass the ball, he just said, ultimately, I don't really care what you say. I'll just take the 5 rings. That's the difference in mentality. There's a lot of people out there, even though they wouldn't say it, their actions say that they'd rather have like 2 championships and be the nicest guy in the world and not let their teammate let them down, essentially. They'll be easy on that guy and they'll go, well, you know what, he's not the best player and he's, whatever, I'll play. And then that guy would miss the shot for you. So the problem with it is, the question is, how much do you want to win? If you want to win at all costs, it means at all costs. It means that you're willing to alienate a bunch of fuckers as long as they get their job done.
I mean, most of the championship teams, not just the Bulls, not just the Lakers, actually had that. And I think in League, it's kind of similar. You always have that kind of conflict being created by some kind of leader. Like, you don't have this, like, oh, we're just going to all sit back and like be nice guys and hope for the best. Like, that so rarely happens. You have to have these personalities that will push the entire team forward and take their responsibility upon them. Like it may have been double lift on the TL, like for example, teams in the NBA it may have been like someone like Greg Popovich, even like he took that on himself. That he's like, okay, I take the responsibility. I'm going to do this, and everyone will follow me. And like, there's so many other championship teams, like the Heat too. Like you had Wade, and I guess Pat Riley to a certain extent taking that to the beginning. And at some point, Sportscar and Mr. James were on board with that, like, so that needs to happen. It needs to happen. And people don't understand this, that it's like, you need this conflict because otherwise people will coast. There are certain people that are good in esports. They are going to get there to that professional level, but they got there by partially like just playing the own way that they wanted to. And kind of getting lazy through that, to a certain extent, because they're like, okay, I'm good at that, so why do I bother? You need to be more than that every single year in order to become a player that is going to be respected, and in order to be a player next year, or like us on another roster potentially, or even to be in contention for championships. You need to have that conflict. And like to get back on the league perspective, like I think Reggie was like great at that, like in the beginning of his career. I think Mithy is surprisingly great at that, even though he's like, and like. Because I think people don't quite understand like how good Mithy is as like that kind of motivator. Like that he does this every single day. He drives people forward. He makes sure that the team wants to function. And like what other league examples do I have? Like
I've heard. So that's exactly what I was going to say. Like perks behind the scenes. Like I know G2 has a super like fun atmosphere where it looks like they're trolling all the time, and that's what they want to put out to the community. Yeah, we're just this fun loving team, and we just troll all the time. They have legitimate conflict within that team. And it's not like every time they do a roster swap, it's just motivated by like, Perks just wants to play a new fucking role. Like, these players are fucking hungry. But there's a reason why Perks has 6 fucking championships and he's been able to win with all these different types of players. Like, he is a tenacious competitor. And that's like one of the reasons why I'm such a fucking fanboy of him, or like why I respect him so much as a competitor, is because I've seen him actually been able to win with teams that should not have won titles.
I remember when I met him in Copenhagen in 2018. I mean, after I analyzed the finals, and then I met him at the after party, and he was just like after the game, I just told him, hey, it's okay, like he lost, shit happens, and he's like, he literally was like sobbing, like the same way he was after the finals, like when he lost against FPX, right? He was sobbing, and he was like, like we were just not good enough. Like Fnatic they're so far ahead of us right now. It's so sad. Like I tried so hard to get my team to where they have to be, and that raw emotion like spoke so many things about him as a person that I didn't even know before. And like I was completely dumbfounded when I saw this, because like I didn't expect him to be that kind of leader for that age group, because it's like this is third year in the league, and he's still young. He's still like 2 to 3 years younger than me, so like, or even more. Like so. These players and these like overall, like we keep shutting down that whole like that conflict making, but it needs to happen. And players like that showcase that you don't win a championship. It doesn't matter if it's like, especially in EU, you won't win a championship without conflict. You need to have the conflict in order to be the best possible team possible. There's no other point, and I think like it translates from other sports too. Like. I can't believe I don't believe that Ronaldo, like Cristiano Ronaldo, is a nice person to work with necessarily. He's going to push his players.
Surely nowhere.
Yeah, and then Kobe, Michael, then like Greg Popovich, like even the recent, like to a certain extent, Steve Kerr, like because he learned from Michael, he saw these kind of things, like must have pushed his players forward to a certain extent, like so, like you need to have those hungry players that want to win, because you don't win by chance, you win by someone wanting it more than the other.
I think you've even hit on. I think you've even hit on something there with the Spurs example, because that would be the counter example someone would give. Like, what are you talking about? Look at the Spurs, like Tim Duncan, the nicest guy ever, like Manu Ginobili, just a cool guy. That's because their coach did the role there. That was the point. Like, that's another angle I think you needed here is, right, leadership should never be one guy. It has to be a team effort. So what you do is people do their strength. So the reason also why the Michael Jordan approach would be terrible on its own is because it would just wreck everyone in the squad. Because they had the Scottie Pippen angle to be the ultimate nice guy, it's literally good cop, bad cop. That's what you're doing. You're doing it like, right, the arsehole comes in and you're like, oh, fuck this. But he has a point. But then what would stop you taking the point in is being such an arsehole. So then when the nice guy puts sand around, he goes, you know what he sort of means by that? He means like, do the, you go, oh, yeah, see, and he is the best player. So like, you need someone to sort of do the push-pull with them. So in this particular case, that's one of the problems. I also think a lot of these players who are like very good players who have really hard to work with personalities, they never had someone, unfortunately, they could trust who could do that role for them.
And they also don't create that though. They don't like, and that's like, again, like Forgiven and Dardoch. I mean, I know more of Forgiven. I know less about Dardoch, but I know that he doesn't openly like if anyone is nice in the team. So it's like he thinks anything. He actually thinks that anything that happens in the team that's like nice and not pushing the team forward within that moment is like kind of like detrimental to the team's success, and he takes that as weakness. It's kind of like that apex predator who's gonna like fucking like then like bite your neck off, you know. So that's how he behaves in a team, which is like you can't go that far. You have to like at least balance certain things out, and have to make sure that like you just don't destroy someone's personality, but you allow them to regrow. And I had such an interesting conversation recently with someone like about it, that like we came to the same conclusion. Like you need to have this push, you need to have the killer instinct, like where someone's pushing the team forward, but you also need someone that basically like allows like people to be themselves to a certain extent in order to not entirely destroy the persona, or at least in that regard like try to like allow them to regrow themselves to a stronger personality afterwards. Because if you just continue to destroy someone, you're fucking bad, you're fucking bad, you're fucking bad, at some point they're like, I'm fucking bad, because like that's all they hear. But they need like, okay, you're fucking bad, but this is what you can do better, or there's certain things that we have to work on together, let's do it together, these kind of things, to kind of balance that whole thing out. And then they become a more resilient version of themselves than they were before.
There's actually literally scientific basis to this that I can give you a very interesting like side topic that'll relate to this, because it's something I never understood. Because one thing I never understood in life was like there clearly is like a truth or like an effectiveness to that approach at driving people. But what you find is, yeah, they have teams where it works, championships where it works, and then they have the ones where it doesn't, and it does destroy them. So you think, well, what's the balance, right? Basically, there was a study, it was a guy, I've looked it up now, it's called Yak Pansep, so people can look this up online. Yeah. And basically, this was a guy who was doing behavioral experiments on rats, right? And he noticed that when rats, because apparently young rats will just for fun wrestle with each other, right? They'll just come along, they wrestle, and then what's mad is really like wrestling. Like they like scramble a bit. It's like they think of the UFC when they like haven't gone to the ground yet. They're like pushing each other, and then what happens is when one of them gets the other one down, and for the sake of the term, we'll say pins him. He doesn't really like, they don't know it's pinning, but you know, once you're trapped, then the other rat lets go, right? And it's kind of like they know, like, right, well, I won that one. So it's kind of like wrestling for rats, right? This is the interesting part. You would think, right, that if there's a big rat and a small rat, the small rat's never going to agree to play like that. Like, why would you, right? You're going to get wrecked by the big rat. That's the interesting thing. What he observed was, if the big rat and the small rat, and so the big rat in theory should win all the time, wins all the time. He wins like 90% of these wrestles. Then what happens is the small rat just goes, fuck this, and just stops playing, refuses to play. But as long as the big rat lets the small one win 30% of the time, it doesn't have to even be 50%, just let him win 30% of the time, then the little rat will keep playing, even though he's losing 7 out of 10 times. So the principle I would say here is not that you like literally just say it's fine, but it's like you can't bring up everything they do wrong. It can't always be that they're an idiot. It can't. So I would just make it like this. You can be harsh, you can be a driving person, but every now and then, in fact, you see this in The Last Dance, when they win that game 7 against the Pacers, Michael Jordan goes to all the people in the room, and half of them probably didn't even play well. He just goes like, oh, great job on the rebounds, like you did a fucking good job with the block. Like, yeah, every now and then you got to give them a little bit back, whereas the difference is some of the Forgiven and Dardoch type motherfuckers, it's like when things go well, they're just like, yeah, what are you looking at me for, bitch? Like, you're supposed to do your job. It's like, fucking, you forgive him something, throw him a bone.
Well, damn. I mean, I think that's a good place to end the episode. I mean,
science, bitch.
Yeah, we ended with some fucking science. So yeah, this has been the longest episode of the Crackdown that we've done, but it was a pleasure having you on. You know, we went into a bunch of different things way back. Yeah, we ended up on a sports topic too. So it's been super interesting overall. So I appreciate you coming on the show. We'd love to have you back sometime. And yeah, thank you for everyone in the chat that ended up watching this episode and everyone that enjoyed it. So yeah, we'll see you guys next week for another episode of the Crackdown. Thanks for watching, guys.